Yantiv.
You don't want it?
Good Yantiv, everyone. Good Yantiv. Let's try this again. Guys, let's try this again. Good Yantiv. Good Yantiv. Good Yantiv. I want to ask everyone here to please raise your glasses and say l'chaim together. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'vracha. Chassidus, sibateiva, l'shamateiva, l'suka, l'chaim. We're all here, each of us feels in ourselves, there's something in us, something greater than ourselves, than what we are right now inside of us. And we know that it's there, it's possible for it to come out and to be expressed and to be active and to live in a higher and deeper way than we are already. We know that it's there, we know it's possible. We come to Farbrengen to bring that out, to actually make it happen. Farbrengen is not about learning something we haven't learned before necessarily, though we may learn many things together. Farbrengen is more about answering that voice inside us that asks, what is my mission here? What's my role? And summon the strength and the wherewithal and the energy and the joy to make it actually happen. Tonight is both the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the birthday of the Alter Rebbe. And we know that on the day of a birth, your mazel shines. You have more mazel. You have more of your soul's energy is revealed on the day of your birth. So, as this is the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov, the birthday of the Alter Rebbe, this is a day when their mazel, when their light shines more than any other night. It says that on the night of a birthday in Gan Eden in heaven, the soul whose birthday it is shares Torah teachings. And all other souls in heaven, they sit around like we're sitting around together, and they come and they all hear a teaching from the soul whose birthday it is. So as we're sitting over here together, there's a Farbrengen going on in heaven, and we're connecting with that Farbrengen in heaven by connecting with each other over here. There's something very unique about the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe that we're so fortunate to have some kind of a connection to them. Just one thought I was thinking about today. People look at this time of year as a very morose and sad, and even bitter time, because it's before the day of judgment, because it's before this ominous heavenly tribunal which is going to judge us and try to get at us. And here comes the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe says he got it all wrong. The month of Elul is the greatest, the most beautiful month of the year. It's a time when the king is in the field. The time when Hashem is especially receptive to us and listens to us, like a king who comes out to a field to see the subjects because he loves every single one of them. And so to God is like this king, who is our king, and he comes, he makes himself accessible to us in this month to listen to us, to be close to us. No matter what has happened, he says, I'm accepting the way you are, and I want to hear from you. I want you to ask me what you need, because I'm here from you, and I love you, and I want to give you. Yom Rosh Hashanah is not on the day you'd expect it to be. When is the day that a farmer needs God the most? When he's looking to heaven and he's really worried about what God's going to say? The day that a farmer needs God the most is when he's planting the seeds. When he's planting the seeds, he doesn't know what kind of a weather there'll be, doesn't know if the seeds will grow, doesn't know if animals will ruin it. So he's planting the seeds, the farmer is really concerned, and he really has his eyes on God. God, please help him. When is the farmer the least worried about heaven? What's going to happen in heaven with decisions we make in heaven? The day he's worried the least is when he has the harvest, he has the fruit in his basket, and it's all ready. It's December 31st in the agricultural world. He has all the fruit in his basket. And Hashem specifically chose Rosh Hashanah to be at the time of harvest. And the reason is because Hashem doesn't want us to look at Rosh Hashanah as a time that we're worried about what he's going to say. Rosh Hashanah is the opposite. It's a day when we make this covenant, we make this bond with Hashem, and we say to Hashem that no matter what has happened, or whatever has happened in the past, we dedicate ourselves to you with love, and we're never going to let go of you. And God does the same for us. Hashem says to each of us, I'm never going to let go of you. That's what the day of Rosh Hashanah is. And all the fruit is in the basket. Imagine, you walk in the synagogue, and there is an angel at the door of the synagogue, and he says, I see in the books that you're going to be asking for a soulmate this year. You're going to be asking for a child this year. You're going to be asking for a peace at home. You're going to be asking for good health. You're going to be asking to have nachas from your children. You're going to be asking that Israel has total and complete peace all the time. You're going to be asking for Mashiach to come. So the angel pulls out a paper and he says, I have the answers to your prayers. And I tell you what's going to happen. Check, 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 check. The answer is yes to all the above. So what do you do then? You already have all the answer. You know you're going to get what you're asking for. Do you still walk in the synagogue? You may feel like, okay, I took care of it already. So Hashem says to us, the fruits are in the basket already. The blessings are already there. And the purpose of Rosh Hashanah is not in order to find favor in the eyes of the heavenly court. The purpose of Rosh Hashanah instead is to connect with God, with love, with happiness. These are words I just said in the last discourse the previous Rebbe gave in this world. The last discourse he gave before he passed away. And the Rebbe said that discourse is a message for every Rosh Hashanah until the coming of Mashiach. You have to know Rosh Hashanah is a joyous holiday. It's a day of celebrating our connection with Hashem. A day of celebrating our connection with each other. It's a day not of fear and worry. It's a day of absolute celebration. And from tonight until Rosh Hashanah, there are 12 days. Each day corresponds to one of the 12 months of the year. So tonight corresponds to the first month of the year, corresponds to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Simchas Torah. And this day, the day of the 18th of Elul, the day of the Baal Shem Tov, the day of the Alter Rebbe, it has the power to launch us from the last Rosh Hashanah, the last Yom Kippur, and Simchas Torah, and help us prepare for this coming Rosh Hashanah, this coming Yom Kippur, this coming Simchas Torah. It's a day when we can really arrange everything we want to arrange for the entire year because it's such a pivotal day. So on this day, we need to think about one of the cardinal teachings of Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. The Baal Shem Tov taught that God didn't just create the world thousands of years ago. But every single moment, God recreates the world again every second. And the reason he does this is because he wants us to constantly feel gratitude towards him. To constantly feel that we're being given kindness from God every moment. And that makes us feel the warm feeling that Hashem is constantly giving us love and kindness. It makes us want to feel deserving of it. It makes us want to feel even higher than we were before. That's what this night is about. It's about feeling the king is in the field, that we can be where we want to be. Hashem is opening the door for us with joy, and nothing holding us back. And by celebrating with joy, we're going to be there with Yerushalayim, with Mashiach Tzidkenu, and we see this happen tonight together. We have with us tonight Rabbi Raleigh Resnick, Rebbe's emissary to Chabad, the Tri-Valley. Many of us listen to him usually on double speed because he gives a class in the Rambam, and everyone listens to him every single day. They're trying to listen to a little quicker to get the class done earlier. But if you listen to him on single speed, if you haven't tried it yet, it's so much more beautiful. So before we hear from Rabbi Resnick, let's sing a Geschmack and Niggin, the Niggin of the Baal Shem Tov, Niggin of Shalosh B'nos. Huh? Got that? Shalosh B'nos? Everyone please together. Zelle Chaim. Chaim and Rav.
Have a loud voice. Yeah, that might come further. Thank you. we got more. L'chaim. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good Yom Tov. Good evening. Rabbi Zalman Gerari was a well-known chassid in Crown Heights, and the story is told as follows. Rabbi Zalman Gerari left his home in Crown Heights, went to the airport to get on the last flight of the evening. I don't know where he was going, a business trip, family, whatever it was. He gets to the airport only to find out that his flight is canceled. Shalom. He's going to speak, you want to speak? Only to find out that his flight is canceled. Now, most of us, the last flight of the day is canceled. Most of us will go back home and get on a flight the next morning. But not Rabbi Gerari. You see, there's something we know called Savos Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. The ethical will of one of the great Rishonim, Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. And he has an ethical will. Perhaps people are familiar with some of the practices and customs that he describes there. Most of us are not particular about all of his instructions. Sometimes we are. One of his instructions he writes there is that if you leave your home for a specific purpose, you should not come back to your home until you have gotten to where you're supposed to go. You might see someone, they go out to shul, they go to get the car, they forgot their keys. Instead of going back home, they ask someone from the house to get the keys because they don't want to go back. Many people, this is the practice he writes. Now, most of us are not particular about this, but he was. And he was faced with a dilemma. What should he do? He left the house. He didn't get on the plane. Should he go back or not? Now, he enjoyed a very personal connection and relationship with the Rebbe. So, from something called a payphone, may they rest in peace, in the airport, he picked up the phone and phoned the Rebbe's office. Rabbi Chodakov answers the line. And he explains his dilemma. Rabbi Chodakov puts him on hold. And Rabbi Chodakov returns with the following message. The Rebbe has said that you are to study a perek, a chapter of Tanya. For when one studies a perek of Tanya, one becomes a new person. And then the person who left will not be the same person who is returning. That's the story. The Rebbe was not one to speak in hyperbole. He wasn't using poetic license. He really meant it. He really meant that the Alter Rebbe's teaching, that the Baal Yom who led us today, that the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe have the capacity to change our lives. We see every seminar that says this is a life-changing seminar. Well, guess what? This book really is. And tonight, in our Farbrengen together, I'd like to talk a little bit about that. How is it that learning chassidus can and will indeed change us just a little bit? Some of you may know my father, may he rest in peace, had the great zchus, the great privilege, to be the personal physician of the Rebbe. In 1977, the Rebbe suffered a heart attack in the middle of Hakafas, in the middle of Simchas Torah. At the time, the Rebbe did not want to go to the hospital, and so there were physicians who were there, who were in town, who were local. They didn't know what to do. They set up the Rebbe's room as an intensive care unit, and my father had a personal connection with Rabbi Groner, the Rebbe's secretary, and so my father, who was then stationed in the army, he was drafted in the army. My father was actually the youngest doctor in the country at the time. He was announced by Walter Cronkite. He graduated medical school before his 21st birthday. And he was drafted to run a CRC, a clinical research center in Honolulu, Hawaii, for the United States Army. He's there in Hawaii, he gets a call from Rabbi Groner. Perhaps, do you know this doctor? My father's from Chicago. Do you know this doctor in Chicago? Do you know this doctor? My father was as helpful as he thought he could be on the telephone, and he thought that would be the end of his professional connection and relationship with Lubavitch, with the Rebbe. The next weekend, he had a conference in Montreal, and the weekend thereafter in Washington, D.C. Between Montreal and Washington, D.C., he stopped off about 10 days after the heart attack for Parshas Noach in Crown Heights. Now you have to understand, the doctors who were there They had practices, they had families, they had to get back to their families, their practices. They needed someone to be in 770, to live there, to be there, to tend to the medical care of the Rebbe. My father comes, and you know the expression, make me an offer I can't refuse? They made him an offer he couldn't refuse. They said, would you be willing to stay and take care of the Rebbe? And my father said, it would be an honor. Thank you very much, but there's a slight problem. I'm enlisted in the United States Army. If I overstay my leave of absence, I'm going to be court-martialed. So the Lubavitcher said, don't worry, we'll take care of it. Which at the time, my father didn't realize that means they have no idea what they're going to do. He came to learn that later. And so they started. Lubavitch had connections. There was a Senator, Scoop Jackson, who was a good friend of Israel from Washington. There was connections in the State Department, where Rabbi Avraham Shem Tov had some connections with Chabad. They tried and tried, but you see in that year, in 77, that's when the draft stopped. The United States Army stopped drafting people into the Army. So therefore, they didn't want to let anybody go, because if they let you go, they had no one to replace you with. Now, unbeknownst to my father, who is in 770 at the time, they're pulling the strings, they're trying this and they're trying that. And one day, if you walk into 770, the first door on the right is where the Rebbe's secretaries used to sit. One day there's a phone call, Dr. Resnick, you have a phone call on the line. Now, there were many phones in that office. People would call nonstop, asking for brachas, asking for counsel, asking for advice. But there was one phone call. It was a yellow rotary phone. If that phone line rung, you answered it. The other lines you tried to get, but that phone you answered because very few people knew the number to that number, that line. So someone says, Dr. Resnick, you have a call on that line. And my father picked up the receiver, expecting to hear the voice of the Rebbe's wife, the Rebbetzin. She would call numerous times, constantly to ask for a progress report, ask for an update, how are things going? And I'm a little young to remember this, because I wasn't born yet. But on the other end of the line, the man said, this is Hamilton Jordan's office. Chief of Staff to the President of the United States of America, President Jimmy Carter. And using a couple of four-letter words, the guy said, who the heck are you? And why the heck should we do this for you? And if you don't get back to your post, ... I never knew what the ... were. That's the way my father told the story. My father was stunned. First of all, he doesn't usually receive calls from the Chief of Staff of the President's office. And he also people don't usually talk to him that way. And I guess God puts thoughts into your mind, and I'll use the words lahavdil elef havdalos la'iketz to make an infinite differentiation. But my father said that if the Pope, lahavdil elef havdalos la'iketz, would have asked for a United States Army doctor to take care of him, you would think it a big honor. You would hold a press conference. He said, for the Jewish people, lahavdil, this is the same thing. And the guy sort of said, we'll get back to you, and he hung up the phone. And the result of that phone call was not that my father was let out of the Army, but that by United States Army orders, my father was transferred from Honolulu, Hawaii to 770 Eastern Parkway to tend to the medical care of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He moved from a 3-bedroom condo to Rabbi David Roskin's office. Those of you who know is about the size of that keyboard right there. He moved into 770. He lived there until Rosh Chodesh Kislev, which is where someone decided that it would be a good idea to have a shidduch with my mother, and I'm standing here before you today. But the reason I'm sharing the story is not just because it's a good story, not just because it's a personal story, but because this story exemplifies and really expresses the attitude of what Chabad and chassidus is. That you know what, if it was necessary and if it was the right thing for Dr. Resnick to become the Rebbe's doctor, then failure is not an option. If it means going to the President of the United States of America, so be it. It needs to happen, it will happen. In fact, if you have to sort of summarize the attitude, the success of Lubavitch, it would be this attitude. It has to happen, it will happen. And that comes from a life of chassidus, from a Weltanschauung, from a worldview, from a perspective, from internalizing the teachings of the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov. And tonight, in our Farbrengen together, I'd like to talk a little bit about that. You know, the elder statesman of Chabad, Rabbi Shmuel Levin, passed away in the 70s. He was a man from the old country. He was the senior Chabad rabbi here among the Chassidim in America. And the story is told that when the previous Rebbe came here and they needed to arrange citizenship immigration papers, so he traveled from Brooklyn to Manhattan to be able to arrange the paperwork for the previous Rebbe. And he needed a driver, so he called one of the young yeshiva students at the time, Rabbi Yitzchak Groner, and he said, hey, come, drive me to Manhattan, and we're going to go. He comes there. It was the first time that he ever was on a skyscraper in his life. He was never more than 2 or 3 or 4 stories above the earth. He came from the old country, he took a boat across the sea, he was in Brooklyn, and for the first time he's on a skyscraper, 50, 60 stories in the air. And in Yiddish he tells this Bacher Yitzchak Groner, he says, you know what? When you lift yourself up, the whole world really seems a lot smaller. Because if anybody, we all have learned Tanya in this room. Isn't it amazing that the book of Tanya, this is the magnum opus, the opus grande of the Alter Rebbe. It's not a book that's dealing with questions. In fact, in the entire book, there is no question. The book of Tanya lifts us up to a place where there are no questions. Where if it means going to the President of the United States of America, so be it. It gives us a different perspective. When I first moved here to California, so our head shliach, Rabbi Kunin, he said, I need to meet you first. He was then they had a campus up in the mountains somewhere. So my wife and I went there, and I'll never forget, he called me in his office. And he says to me, Resnick, I'm going to tell you there are only 2 types of people in this world. He used to say this a lot in those days. Those who believe, and those who don't believe. For those who believe, there are no questions. And for those who don't believe, there are no answers. It's really true, it really is. When we learn chassidus, it lifts us up to a place where there are no questions. It lifts us up to a place where there's clarity. It lifts us up to a place where we don't have to deal with all the schmutz. Everybody today is dealing with their issues. They're not paying people $250 an hour to deal with their issues. Usually they're not even dealing with the issues. But chassidus lifts us up to a place where we don't have to deal with the issues. There are no issues. At the end of davening every day, we say, Ein Kelokenu. You ever think about it? We say, Ein Kelokenu, there's nothing but God. Ein Kadanenu, there's nothing but our Master. Ein Kelokenu, there's nothing but our King. What do we say then next? Mi Chalakenu, who's like our God, who's like our King, who's like our Master? It's very Jewish. First we give the answer, and then we ask the question. But that's what Jews do. First we have it clear, it's obvious. There's nothing but God. I grew up in Washington Heights. Those of you who know a little bit of New York, Washington Heights is on the top of Manhattan. Our precinct had the highest homicide rate in the country. We were really proud of that. And I'll never forget, there was a Lubavitcher living in the neighborhood. His name was Noach Bernstein. Maybe some of you know Rabbi Noach Bernstein was a shechet. And he was living there. He walks out of his building on Bennett Avenue. I was in 6th grade at the time. And the guy comes up to him and says, give me your money. He mugged him. Pointed a gun right at him. Rabbi Bernstein looked at the man, square in the face, and said, Ein oid milvadoi. There's nothing but God. The guy thought he was crazy and ran away. After he stopped screaming, the guy came back into the building and held him up again. And said, give me your money. And Rabbi Bernstein looked at him square in the face and said, Ein oid milvadoi. There's nothing but God. The guy said, this guy's completely crazy. And he ran away. It's a true story. I remember it happening. Wow. Chassidus lifts us up to a place where there are no questions, where there is only one God. That's the truth. There's a famous scene that most of us have seen on videos. I was in 1st grade when I was there, 2nd grade, 1987. One of the greatest Lag BaOmer parades that Lubavitch put on. It was at the time, it was an incredible parade. And the MC, the master of ceremonies, Rabbi Yaakov Yehuda Heft, is there. And those who are either there or who have seen the video, I don't remember it happening live, but we've all seen the video. And he had been going through evidently a difficult time, maybe personally, organizationally. And really being at the parade had just lifted him up. He was on a high. And he turned to the Rebbe and he said, Rebbe, I want to thank you for schlepping me out of my tzaros, for dragging me out of my woes. And the Rebbe turns to him and says, Aros geschleppt? I schlepped you out. Ufgeheven! I lifted you up. Ufgeheven! I lifted you up. That's the truth. The truth is that tonight is a night. It's Chai Elul. It's a really special night. It's the night of the inception of all that we have that lifts us up. It's the incredible gift that we have to lift us out of our woes and our garbage and our schmutz and just lift us up. And Rabbi said tonight is not a shear, but sometimes there's some basic ideas in chassidus that really, we all know these ideas, but when we hear them, and as the Rabbi said earlier, we're not here to learn anything new, but they really make a difference. So permit me for just a moment to share a basic idea in chassidus that we've all learned so many times, and allow it to lift us up, to be able to see the world through a perspective where there are no obstacles, and where we'll go to the President of the United States of America to make it happen. So we all know in chassidus, we sort of see the world through two words, or and keli. You have the or, you have the light, you have the substance, you have the content, you have the energy, and then you have the keli, you have the packaging, you have the container, you have the vessel. So I'm communicating an idea to you, that's the or, and I'm using words. The words I'm using are they contain and convey the idea. A composer has a melody in his soul. So that fire and the spirit of his soul, that's the or, that's the energy, and the musical notes contain and convey that melody. You have a country has its patriotism, that's the strength, that's the energy, that's the vivacious consciousness of the country. And then it has the keli, the anthem, the flag, the army. And here's the $1 million question. Do me a favor, it's very distracting. So the $1 million question, the life-changing, the life-altering question in life is, how do we see the world? Do we see the world through the perspective of the Ur, or do we see life through the perspective of a Keli? That's the question. Do we see ourselves as a neshama, or do we see ourselves as a guf? Do we see this world as a material world that happens to be brought into existence by God, or do we see this world as continuously pulsating divinity? That's the question. And when we learn chassidus, it lifts us up to a space where we start realizing and identifying with our neshama. We start realizing and identifying our, that's what we become. That's who we are. The Alter Rebbe, in Lekut Torah, writes something interesting. He gives us a little science lesson. I must have missed that in my high school chemistry. But he asked the question, why is it that at Har Sinai, the hallmark of Har Sinai at Mount Sinai was Asham, there was this smoke. Why is that, so to speak, the imagery? Why is that the hallmark of Har Sinai that we have this smoke? And he answers very simply, that smoke is created by burning something physical. When you burn something, you create smoke. All of Har Sinai, Mount Torah, was there to be able to allow us to take the physical and to uplift it. So it became smoke. But then he says something beautiful. He says, smoke is very flammable. Take a match. I have a candle. I tried it with my kids after I learned the mimer. Take a match, extinguish it, there's smoke. Take a candle, extinguish it, there's smoke. And then all of a sudden put a lighter. As the smoke is coming up, put a lighter. You know what happens? The smoke actually gets lit and rekindles the candle. Because when we lift ourselves up, we become more susceptible. We become more refined. We become more susceptible to the Ur Elokim. We start recognizing and realizing the divinity, the holiness that's within this world. We start identifying that way. I'll never forget. We moved to California 18 years ago, and for the first year, we were going to make our annual women's event. Now it's, thank God, a Kala event with hundreds of women, and it has this sort of a branding and a name, but at that time we were just trying to get it started. We're looking for a fancy place to be able to give it an event of stature, and I'm sure, as is the case all over, there are these private subdivisions that have a clubhouse, and if you own a home in the subdivision, then you can rent the fancy clubhouse or the club room. So we said, we're going to do an event there, and we'll call her Sharon. We're going to ask Sharon. Sharon lives in this subdivision. We're going to ask Sharon if she can rent the room for us. Okay. Let's go. So, we go to Sharon's house, and we pull up, and we're going to sign the paperwork, and Sharon has a son, and we'll call him Jeff. Jeff is a teenager. Thank God now he's married many years later. Jeff, I had met him only once before. Jeff, come, let's put on tefillin. Okay. I go to Jeff's room and we're going to put on tefillin together. I walk into his room, and in his room, there is a poster on the wall, and I didn't have a rabbi on speed dial, but I'm not sure that by Jewish law you're allowed to put on tefillin in front of this poster. Not so sure that it's allowed. I didn't ask anybody a question. We put on the tefillin, we leave this room. I come downstairs, and I ask his mother, Sharon. I said, Sharon, why do you let Jeff have that poster? She's such a refined, she's such a person, an upstanding person with values, with morals, with ethics. I said, why do you let him have this poster? And she gives me that look, that look like he's a teenager. What do you want me to say? Okay, I'm not saying anything. I'm a new Chabad rabbi. Chabad rabbis are supposed to be nice. We don't push. Okay, at least in the beginning. Okay, fine. She signed the paperwork. We're now going to the office. You have to hand in the contract that you're going to sign the lease, the rental agreement. So she gets into her fancy SUV. We get into our jalopy Chabad car, and we're going to follow her to the rental office. So Jeff decides he's going to hop into the passenger seat. His mother is driving. They are pulling out of the driveway, 3.28 miles an hour. And I hear Sharon on the top of her lungs screaming, Jeff, put on your seatbelt! And it hit me. 3 seconds ago, you just told me you can't tell Jeff what to do because he's a teenager. You can't tell teenagers what to do, right? And now all of a sudden, in a closed subdivision where people are driving 15 miles an hour on the streets, and you're pulling out of your driveway at 3.28 miles an hour, you're telling them to put on a seatbelt. What happened over here? How did that happen in the same sentence? She didn't realize that contradiction. The answer is very simple. It's very simple. And that is that posters, inappropriate posters, that's an important value. It's an ethic. It's something she believes in very strongly. But in California, health, safety, tofu, Brussels sprouts, that's me. That's my identity. That's what I identify with. That's me. And you know what? If it's me, then it's you. Because there's a difference between what's important to us and who we are. When we learn to this, it becomes who we are. We all know that famous story of the people that are trying to get that chassid, that guy in the plane, to put on the tefillin. No one can get him to put on tefillin. And then the elder, the Bengal Futterfas, the venerable chassid, he turns to the man and with 8 words he's able to do it. What does he say? He says, I Jew. You Jew. I tefillin? You tefillin. It worked. He got it. Tefillin is not a nice idea. It's not a mitzvah. It's not a value. It's not an obligation. It's who I am. A mother doesn't take care of their baby because they have an obligation to do so. If they do that, it's sad. A mother takes care of her baby because that's who I am. When we learn chassidus, what happens is that it becomes who we are. We all know, Tanya, the Alter Rebbe tells us that Hillel, when Hillel used to go to eat, every time he used to go to eat, you know what he would say when he would sit down to eat? He would say something like, sorry, I gotta go feed him, I'll be back. That's not me, I have to feed, I have a body on, it's important, I have to take care of it. It's an obligation, it's something I do, but that's not me. That's not who I am. And this is what Chai Elul is. Chai Elul is the day that we start identifying with Elokus. We start identifying with the Eibishter. We start identifying with our neshamas. We start identifying with the godly light that's within creation. That's what today is. And tonight we have a special capacity. There's a susceptibility in the air. Tonight we have that capacity to be able to connect to the Alter Rebbe, to be able to connect to the Baal Shem Tov, and to be able to do that in an incredible way. It was a Sunday, and my mother brought us $1 to the Rebbe, and I think it was actually recently in one of the gems they had it featured. And my mother asked the Rebbe for a little chassidus nachas from us, her children. And the Rebbe said, a little? You should have a lot. A few moments later, my father came by, and my father asked for a small bracha to have success in his medical research. And I'm paraphrasing because the Rebbe didn't say these exact words. But he said something to the effect of, what's wrong with your residence? Your wife asks for a little, you ask for small. God is big, he can give a little as easily as he can give a lot. So ask for a lot. So my father said, a lot is also good. The Rebbe said, no, that's the main thing. The main thing is a lot. So tonight should be a night of a lot. We're a few days away from Rosh Hashanah. It's a big deal. Let us feel that energy. Let us connect to the Baal Shem Tov. Let us connect to the Alter Rebbe in a very real and true way. And let us start changing our perspective a little bit, to move the needle a little bit, to be able to see a lakus b'pshitus, that there really is a God in our lives and in the world full time.
Why do you say a little bit?
You see? Thank you very much. Thank you. You see, the whole thing was nothing. L'chaim, l'chaim. L'chaim. My father grew up in America, 1950s, and Jewish life in America, he was Orthodox Jew, but Jewish life in America in general was a little bit more of a melting pot. You know, today everyone's into pride, ethnic pride, cultural pride, religious pride, this pride, that pride, Babbage pride. Everyone was talking about Rabbi Levin. Everyone keeps their names. You can't pronounce anybody's name anymore. You know, the Polish guy who goes to the DMV, they ask him to read the first line. He says, "What do you mean read? I know the guy." Right? So, but in those days, 1950s America, people tried to fit in a little bit more. And my father, who was an observant Orthodox Jew, when he went to work, he did not wear a yarmulke. When he saw patients, he did not wear a yarmulke. As a kid, I remember he would close his office door, put on his yarmulke, eat lunch, make a bracha, and then he would go out to see his patients without wearing a yarmulke. Okay? My mother, may she be well, is a Balas Tshuva, and as we know, Bali Tshuva have a certain zest, a certain fire, a certain passion that perhaps those of us who were born from don't have. And at a certain point, there was a doctor from Florida. He was a plastic surgeon who had a connection with the Rebbe. And at one point, the Rebbe told him, you know, you make people's faces look beautiful. A man's face looks beautiful when it has a beard. And you should think about starting to grow a beard. And so when my mother heard that, and I don't know the way she said it exactly, but she said something to the effect that is, how come you tell that doctor to have a beard on, but my husband, you don't even encourage him to wear a yarmulke when he's at work? You know, like a good wife should do. So again, I'm not going to respond, this is not verbatim, but the Rebbe said to my mother as follows. The Rebbe said, I know your husband. When your husband is at work, he is fulfilling a mitzvah. The Torah says, "V'rapa yirape." He has a duty from God to heal his patients. And I know your husband. He will feel self-conscious if he is wearing a yarmulke at work. And it's going to interfere with his ability to perform his medical duties. And that is the reason that I do not ask him to wear a yarmulke. That's the first part of the story. Fast forward. President Bush Sr. got sick. Maybe some people remember he grew up in Japan or in China. You remember that? I don't remember. He had an endocrine condition. His wife had just contracted Crohn's disease. And he had an endocrine condition and they could not diagnose it properly. And so the White House called my father and asked him to consult on the case to come to the White House. Somehow my father must have mentioned this to Rabbi Roder or Rabbi Klein, and they called the house, and they asked to speak to my father. And they said, the Rebbe has asked that when you go to see the president, you should wear a yarmulke. That's the story. Reflecting back on the story, I ask you all a question. The Rebbe said he does not asking Dr. Resnick to wear a yarmulke. Why? Because Dr. Resnick is self-conscious and he won't be able to perform his medical duties properly. Now, shouldn't that concern be exacerbated, exponentially so, if the patient you're treating is the leader of the free world? I mean, unless the Rebbe didn't like Bush, why did that concern not exist? So hold that thought for a moment, and I want to share with you a letter of the Rebbe. It's a letter that I look at quite often. It's one of the most inspiring letters that I live with, and I'll share it with you, and hopefully it will be meaningful for you as well. The letter is written on the 14th day of Av in the year 1950, Tafshin Yud. It's been 6 months since the Frierdiker Rebbe has passed away. It's 6 months, almost to the day that the Rebbe will assume the role of Rebbe. And the man is writing the question as follows. His father has recently passed away. He is not a man of means. He doesn't have money. He is a sheikhet. He has a job offer. And the job offer is to be a sheikhet. You know, the stockyards are a little bit away from the city at that time, 1950. He can get a job. He will be able to support his family, and they have taken out loans to pay for the funeral. If he gets this job, he will be able to pay back the loans for the funeral, but he won't have a minyan 3 times a day to say Kaddish for his father. What should he do? This is the question. This is paragraph 1 of the letter. What should he do? Paragraph number 2 of the letter. The Rebbe extols the virtue of supporting your family and how we make so many allowances in Jewish law to be able to support your family. Paragraph number 3 of the letter. The fact that you've taken out loans, paying back those loans is very important spiritually for your father's soul. And you have other people who are going to be able to say Kaddish. You have brothers. So the fact that you have brothers saying Kaddish for you is much better than having to pay someone who's not a brother, because his actual child will be saying Kaddish, and therefore that's much better. Paragraph number 4 of the letter. Since you won't be able to have a minyan, therefore I would encourage you to lead the benching. Even though the Rebbe writes, when I was mourning for my father in Tafshin Dalet in 1944, when my father passed away, I did not make sure to always lead the mezuzah and the benching, but I had a minyan. You're not going to have a minyan. You should make sure to lead the benching. You should recite and learn the appropriate Mishnah, the Mishnayos. You should give tzedakah, even though you won't have a minyan. That's the first 4 paragraphs of the letter. If I were to stop the letter here, we would all say, well, the Rebbe is encouraging the person to take the job. Paragraph number 5 of the letter. I write all of the above because I am not familiar with the state of your trust and faith in God. But if you will have pure and sincere faith, you will believe that God can provide you with a job in an area with a minyan, signed the Rebbe signature. This letter, the reason it means so much to me is because essentially the Rebbe is telling this person, there are 2 modes of existence, there are 2 levels you can live on, and both of them work. You can take the job. That's what Torah says to do. Support your family. It's a virtue. Pay back the loans. You'll be able to do it. That is within the context, within the framework of Orthodox Jewry, of Frumkeit. That is one of the ways to live. However, there's another level to live. You can live on a different level. As you said earlier, you can lift yourself up. Because if you'll have pure and sincere and unadulterated faith and trust in God, you'll believe that He'll be able to find a job and you'll be able to have a minyan. And I think of this letter, when it comes to the story with my father, and I think essentially what the Rebbe was telling my father is, I know under normal conditions you're self-conscious. Okay. You're self-conscious, I'm not going to push you. It's not going to be good for your ability to be a doctor. But there do come some times in life where we have to lift ourselves up. You're coming in front of the president now. Now, there's no room for being self-conscious. Now, you put on the yarmulke, you're representing the Jewish people. You're representing the Jewish people to the President of the United States of America. There are times in life where God calls upon us and says, you know what? We can live on a different plateau. We have to live on a different plateau. And when we do that, that's when the miracles happen. Every single time in my life, and I'm sure everybody has stories like this, whenever we've gone the extra mile for God, God says, aha, you're doing something a little crazy? I'll do something crazy too. It happens over and over and over. When we express that pure and sincere faith of Hashem, when we learn chassidus, and when we learn chassidus properly, and we lift ourselves up to a place where there are no obstacles, there are no hurdles, there are no issues, there are no distractions. It's just us dedicated to the Eibush. I remember I was on American Shlichus in the summer. My yeshiva students, we go to communities that don't have an established presence. At the time, I was in Tokyo. I was in Japan. It's the summer in Tokyo. It's very, very, very humid, even more humid than New York or Florida. It's very, very, very hot. You're walking around with your hat and jacket all day. First of all, I'm about 2 feet taller than everyone else there. I'm bumping my head wherever I'm going into the subway. And you make an appointment with people and you get into the train, you can't take a taxi because it's too expensive. And by the time you get there, you are wiped, you're drained, you have to come with a new change of clothing, you change in the restroom before your meeting. It was fairly exhausting doing this day in and day out. And as those of us who have gone on American Shlichus know, you get the notes from the previous group. So there were boys who had gone there before. We got the notes. And I'll never forget, there was this man, his name was Mr. Meiselbach. And Mr. Meiselbach, there was a note next to his name. Don't go to Meiselbach because he kicked us out of his office. Okay? He works for IBM in Tokyo, so I'm not going to Meiselbach because I don't want to be kicked out of Meiselbach's office. Okay? It's going well, it's exhausting, we're getting to the end of our 2 weeks in Tokyo. You're sleeping on a futon. I mean, the conditions could be a little bit more luxurious. And we're getting to the end. I'll never forget, it was a long day, it was a hard day. We're about to get back into the subway, and in front of us, about 2 blocks down, I see a big building with 3 letters on the building. IBM. Should we go? Should we not go? I don't know. I figured, I don't plan on going back to Tokyo. In fact, it's been 24 years ago, and I haven't been back to Tokyo since. Worst comes to worst, he won't welcome us at his office. Let's go. Okay? So, get to the IBM building. You can't, of course, get into the building without going to the downstairs concierge, the front desk. So I say very confidently, I have a meeting with Mr. Meiselbach. Please, can you please let him know that we're here? And she's typing at her computer, and I see her give me a look of deep compassion. And she tells me, in English, she says, I'm sorry, but Mr. Meiselbach got transferred to our Beijing office. You came to the wrong city for your meeting. I said, she didn't understand why I was so excited. It's like, thank you so much, and I walked out. I did my part, I'm good. At that time, Rabbi Shimon Freundlich had moved to Beijing about a month before then. I got home and I sent an email to Shimon. I said, Shimon, there's a great Jewish family that just moved to Beijing. You really should get in touch with them. The Meiselbachs. The next day was 9/11. I don't remember what happened after that. It was 9/11, 2001. That was the end of the story. 6 months later, I'm in New York. And Mrs. Freundlich comes to me, Raleigh, I got to tell you something. He says, what? He says, remember that family Meiselbach? I said, yeah. He said, well, actually, he's not Jewish, but his wife and children are. And they started something called TGIF. Thank God it's the Freundlichs. And every week, they started serving kosher lunch. And the teen club of Chabad in Beijing started with these teenage boys that has then continued to grow exponentially since. Why did the teenage club, Jewish club, start in Beijing? Because Raleigh Resnick decided that he was going to get out of his comfort zone. He wasn't going to be so self-conscious. He was going to do something a little bit beyond his box. And you know what? God said, you're doing that for me, I'll do that for you. Chai Elul was one of those days. There are a few days of the year like that. Chai Elul is one of those days that the Eibush is saying to us, it's the Chayis and Elul to get out of our box a little bit and to be able to do something for the Eibush. Because the truth is that there's a certain urgency in the air. I'll never forget my father, everyone, Lubavitch was always wanting to hear stories of the Rebbe. So immediately, anytime my father would come and say, oh, please, tell us stories. And he liked talking about NMR spectroscopy, nuclear magnetic imaging in residence, and then measuring intracellular ions. He enjoyed talking about medicine, but he didn't enjoy talking about the Rebbe so much. But I remember once we lived in Michigan at the time, and Rabbi Shem Tov said, please come to the yeshiva. My father couldn't say no to Rabbi Shem Tov, and he came and he was talking there. And at the end, one of the boys said to my father, what was it like being around the Rebbes so long? And my father, not knowing that the boys in Detroit Yeshiva were not football fans, said, let me give you a football analogy. And he said, during the football games, both teams, they play really hard to win. But then there's the buzzer, there's a 2-minute warning. And at the 2-minute warning, both teams go into overdrive. they go into this mode of all hands on deck. He said being around the Rebbe was being around someone who lived his life constantly after that 2-minute warning. There was an urgency in the air. And we ought to feel that urgency. As it has been said, if everyone heard in the world that Mashiach was coming tomorrow, everyone would be jumping for joy except for one person, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Tomorrow? We have to wait till tomorrow for Mashiach to come? Another 24 hours of Galus? There's a certain urgency to life. It really is true. And we ought to feel that. We ought to feel that urgency. 2 years ago, how are we going on time here?
We're in sense of urgency in the air.
Sense of urgency in the air. 3 years ago now, it was the night before Tisha B'Av. I'd fallen asleep downstairs on the couch, learning Rambam or something, and my phone had been lodged between the pillows of the couch. And at 1 in the morning, I was awakened by a phone call. I look at the phone, it looks like this generic number. And though every part of me wanted to ignore this 1 a.m. telemarketer, I answered the phone, and the person says, Mr. Resnick? I say, do you know what time it is? And she says, yes, I'm calling from the Pleasanton Police Department. And I'm thinking this is one of those fundraising things, you know? I said, do you know it's 1 in the morning? She says, I'm calling you because your building on Hop Yard Road is on fire. There was a big fire in the Chabad house. I don't remember what I told her, but I slammed the phone down, went up to tell my wife, ran out the door, drove over, and there had been flames shooting 50 feet in the air that engulfed half of the building. And had it not been for the fire department getting there in time and putting it under control, there would really have been nothing left of the building. This is not a fundraising pitch. But I started running towards the building, and I started saying, the scrolls, let me in. And after restraining me and threatening me with arrest, it was reported on the news the next day that they threatened me with arrest not to walk into the building. But I was able to verbally guide the firefighters to where our 3 Sifrei Torah are, and I was able to take them out and put them into the van. And what's so remarkable about this story is how unremarkable this story is. Because every single person in this room, the first thing when I say that a shul is on fire, the first thing all of us think about is Sifrei Torah. Because you know, when the Torah really needs us, we're there for the Torah. When the Torah is on fire, all of us are there. We're all hands on deck. The Torah needs us. Well, that's that energy, that's that fire we need to have within us. That's why we get together to Farbrengen. That's why we say L'chaim, to be able to feel that urgency, because the truth is that we're in Galus. The truth is that the status quo is not acceptable. And as enjoyable as we have life in California, and as beautiful as our lives are, we ought to sit together on this day and recognize that the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov, they dedicated their life. They gave their life so that we should be able to have the tools to get ourselves and to get the entire world out of Galus. And as the Rebbe said so many times, quoting the Rambam, probably the Rambam that the Rebbe quoted more than any other Rambam, that we have to constantly see the world as a maznayim shakol, as an equal scale. By Yedei Ma'aseh Achas, through one act, and the Rebbe would add, through one word, through one thought, we can tip the scale. That's Kol Ha'olam Kuli in the entire world, but Tafskos L'chaim.
You got plenty of time, don't worry. Sit down for a minute. Oh, great.
Chaim.
Don't forget doing what you do.
Can I take you with me?
All right. Gotta remember that. Got sisters. Our 3 years old. Someone this shabbos shared. Oh, this guy over here. You know why he's here? This guy, Mr. Lipkin. You know why he's here? Mr. Lipkin. Right over here. Next one. NCSY Chabad Shabbat. Yeah.
Hi.
NCSY to go to Chabad.
Koya.
Testing.
Go to Chabad. Made a Shabbat to go to Chabad.
L'chaim. Now everyone can come closer. This is the real crowd. This is.
Bring it back.
Chaim L'Racha. Now we start to Farbrengen.
Now we can start. There was a chassid. His name was Rabbi Moshe Levin. If anybody knew from Montreal, you Montreal is over here, yeah? You know him? That's the way we'll go before you. Oh. And Rabbi Moshe Levin has a beautiful mashal, a story that our Rosh Yeshiva of late, Rabbi Akiva Wagner, he used to share this with us more than often, and it's something that reverberates in my mind very often, especially in a day like Elul. He asked the following question. Can we close the door there?
The hell is that?
Yeah. Let's close the door there. He asked the following question. He said, okay, we're not going to fight with him. In the morning on davening, after Shema, we say the Yatziv, the Nachai, the Kayam, the Yashar 15 times. We say that what we said in Shema is proper, upright, just, true, correct. Why are we doing that? 15 times have to repeat it over and over. So, he said the following story. And the story begins the way all the stories in the shtetl begin. Usually there's a guy, his name is Moshke or something like that. And usually he's a wealthy man and he's a big miser. I think that's the way all the stories start off, right? All the old stories in the shtetl. So there's a man, he's very wealthy, he's the wealthy man, he's the gvir of the town. But he is a miser. For him to part with a nickel, it really hurts him. It hurts him. And he was faced with a dilemma. What's the problem? His daughter got engaged, Mazel Tov. But now he has to make a chassidus. He has to make a wedding, and he's the gvir of the town. So he has to make a wedding for, like this guy's making a wedding. He knows it's not cheap, right? This is the chassid? Mazel Tov chassid. Mazel Tov. So you should not know that it's not cheap. That's for the barons and the in-laws to worry about. But he had to invite the whole town, and it has to be, prime rib. It has to be creme de la creme. But for him to feed the whole town, he doesn't know what to do. So he comes up with a brilliant solution. This is the solution.
I know him for many years.
He tells his brother. Now his brother was a pauper. His brother was a poor guy. He tells his brother, let's do a knunya. Knunya in Gemara means let's be in cahoots together. What we're going to do is as follows. The days before the wedding, the food is going to start rolling into town. Like they still have the chopped liver, the mold, the horse's mold, all the good stuff, the stuff that the doctors say will clog the arteries and give us long, healthy lives. There's going to be food that's going to be coming indoor for days. For days, food will come rolling into town. Okay? It's all going to be put in a warehouse, in a storage house. The night before the wedding, You are going to come, as we're starting the Ksuba with it off. We're starting the Ksuba. You're going to come running in, and you're going to say, "Oh, the food is stolen!" And then you and I will eat the food for the next 6 months. Sounds like a plan? That's the plan. Okay. Things go as planned. The days before the wedding, the food is rolling into town. People's mouths are salivating. They're waiting for the wedding of all weddings. They're waiting to finally be able to eat a 16-course Jewish dinner. And the night comes, and the brother's supposed to run into the rabbi's study and say the food is stolen. But the brother knows something. He knows that as soon as he says that the food is stolen, you think his brother's going to share any of the food with him? He's not going to get to eat it even anyway. So therefore he decides, before I do this, let me at least go. I see the food. Let me at least go to the warehouse and let me taste from every dish, as all good Jewish husbands do on Friday afternoon. You go to every dish and you have to do quality taste control. You know, those who love the Irish, they take a lot of pieces before Shabbos. But you have to take before Shabbos. He decided he's going to, from each dish, he's going to take a little bit. He walks into the warehouse. And you know what he sees? All the food is stolen. He goes racing over to the brother, to the rabbi's study. He comes running to the door. My brother, you won't believe what happened. His brother says, "What happened?" He says, "The food is stolen." He says, "Oh my gosh, oh no, the food is stolen, it's terrible." So his brother tells him, "You don't understand, it's stolen." He says, "I know it's stolen." And he's very impressed. His brother's putting up a really good show. This guy knows how to be an actor. He should have been in Broadway. So he calls over his brother to the side. And he says, "Between me and you, it's stolen?" He said, "I'm telling you, it's stolen." This is not a joke anymore, okay? There's a lot of money of food over here. Tell me the truth, it's stolen. He says, "I'm telling you, it's all stolen." This is not a game. Cut. Finish the script. Okay, come with me. Tell me in my ear. Is it stolen or not? He says, "I'm telling you, it's stolen." And this conversation goes back and forth 15 times. It says in Rabbi Moshe Levin, every morning we turn to ourselves and we say, "Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad." There's nothing but the Eibush, there's only one God. But then we have a conversation with ourselves after Shema. Let me ask you, no. Tell me the truth. Between me and you. You really believe? No. That's not a joke anymore. Now I'm asking you for real. You really believe the Yatzif, the nothing, the Kayim, the Yosher, the Nema? And we have this conversation with ourselves, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. The Alter Rebbe did not just take the teachings of Al Shantiv. He said that this chassidus Chabad. Chassidus Chabad means that it has to become ours. It has to become, we have to internalize it. It has to become who we are. There is a line. There is a line from Chavis Halvavis in the beginning of his opening to Shar Abba. It's a line that the Rebbe quoted numerous times, and it's a line that I think is very, very important for us to try keeping in mind. And it's a scary line. It says like this: Min hanimna mimenu. One of the impossibilities of life. This is one of the impossibilities of life. You're listening? Shetisyashev avas haboyra b'libeinu. That there should be a love of the Creator settled in our hearts. Im avas ha'olam banu. If we have a love to the material world. Says Chavis Halvavis, one of the earliest books of Jewish philosophy, that it is an impossibility for us to love God and to love our Mercedes at the same time. It just doesn't go. The two don't work together. If we want to be able to have Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, if we want to be able to have a real connection with the Eibush, we have to somehow separate ourselves from our enjoyment and from our enthusiasm and from our excitement of Olam Hasa, of materialism. The two come together. There's an inverse relationship. It's very, very, very interesting. Throughout the entire series of the Rebbe's Igros Kodesh, if you look throughout the Rebbe's letters, anytime, I can't say anytime, but almost always, when someone is coming to the Rebbe with an issue, with a this, with a that, the Rebbe, what he does is instead of dealing with the actual issue, he says, how is that possible? He tries lifting us up to a place where it doesn't exist. He tries lifting us up to a space where we don't have those worries. Because if we have the enjoyment of X, we can't have the enjoyment of Y. And if we have the enjoyment of Y, we can't have the enjoyment of X. It takes work. The Yatziv, the Nachim, the Kain, the Yashim. I'll never forget, I was early in my career, so to speak. It was the days when people would answer I would answer the door and people would ask me if my father was home, thinking that I was the rabbi's son. And there was a man His name is Mark. He's become a very dear friend since we used to get together every Thursday night. We used to learn together. Friday morning we'd put on film together, daven a little bit together. Literally one of the first chavrusas I had. And I remember one Thursday night he says, Rabbi, I'm not going to be able to come tomorrow. I said, what's going on, Mark? He says, I'm having a vasectomy tomorrow. Sorry, I'm not able to come. That's a procedure that doesn't allow you to have children anymore. Now, some of you might not be familiar, but one of the 613 mitzvahs is that a man is not allowed to make himself sterile. A man is not allowed to do something to cause himself not to be able to have children. Now, I was just literally a fresh, newbie shliach rabbi. Someone is sharing some rather personal, private information with me. And he leaves, he says, I can't make it tomorrow. This is the days before you texted people, you have to actually call them, which is more difficult. You know, if you don't want to call somebody, what do you do? It's an uncomfortable thing to tell them what you do. You send a text, right? That's what people do when they don't have the strength to call you directly. But in those days, you couldn't just text people. These people were texting each other regularly. I didn't know what to do. It was late at night. I decided, you know what? I'm not going to call them, but I'm going to write an email. And I started, it's about 10:30 at night, I started composing an email with my brilliance and my articulate ability to be able to talk about why the body is not ours, and the biblical prohibition, and the back and forth. And I'm, you know one of those emails, you write 3 lines and then you erase them, and then you write 2 more lines and erase them, and it takes you, it's just not coming. And I'm trying, and it's getting later, and I literally fell asleep in front of the computer. I woke up at about 4 a.m., just got whatever I got out, and said, send the email. 9 a.m., I get an email back with 2 words. Procedure canceled, period. He later confided in me that it wasn't Raleigh Resnick's brilliance. It wasn't anything I wrote in the email. He actually at the time didn't even know if he believed in God. But he said, you know what, the rabbi says is the wrong thing to do. For the first time in my life, I'm going to do something for no reason other than the fact that for whatever reason, the rabbi says God doesn't want me to do it. So that was the life-changing day of my life. It changed our entire family, and it changed my life forever. The truth is that all of us know that when we do something that's difficult, and we say, you know what, Eibishter, the Yatzid, the Nachem, the Kain, the Yashar, I'm going to work at it, I'm going to do it. That's when the miracle happens. That's when the miracle happens. The miracle always happens at that moment when we're about to give in, and we say, you know what, I'm going to hold strong, I'm going to do it. That's when it happens. And I remember one time, it was before Pesach, and I came by, my parents brought me by my mother brought me for dollars, and the Rebbe asked my mother, who's going to be saying the Manishana? And it was myself and my brother, and I wanted to sort of push myself in front of my older brother. I'm going to say the Manishana. And first of all, the Rebbe sort of turns to my brother and says, and he's also going to do it, get yourself out of the way, let your brother have some space also. And then the Rebbe turned to my mother, and the Rebbe did this to many times, to many people. The Rebbe said, these are your children, they're asking the questions, but does your husband, does he know the answers? And it's not just something cute to say, but I think, especially in California, where everybody is always on a quest, and we're always on the journey. You know how we always say it's all about the journey and the quest and the questions. And it's very true, but you know what's also important? That we get the answers. It's also important that we actually do it. At the end of the day, actually having the answer and getting to the finish, getting to the finale, getting to the goal, it's very, very important. So yes, we struggle, and we learn in Tanya the value of the struggle. We learn in Tanya the value of the Beinani. And yes, the Yatzid and Nachem, we're struggling with ourselves. Is it true? Do we only feel the presence of Hashem in the world? Do we also love other things? Do we also feel there's other existence? We have that struggle, but ultimately, we have to answer the question. Because ultimately, it has to be answered. We have to get to the finale. We have to actually really feel that, you know what? There is an Eibishter, and it's really true. And when we do that, when we lift ourselves up, then all of a sudden, it's a different reality. We see things through a different vantage point completely. Rabbi Bezalel Chabad, the first time he had a private audience, he's the head of the Chabad institutions in Michigan. The first time he had a private audience with the Rebbe was in 1953. He tells the story. He was a yeshiva student. He was from England, and he had prepared for his audience. And he was with a bacher, and he had written down all of his internal struggles. He had written of his questions, what he needed to do next, what his next stage should be, what he should learn, what he should focus on in davening. And he had this entire introspective series of questions that he introduces to the Rebbe and his audience. And he says, the Rebbe turned to him and says, on your way back, you're going to be flying over the Atlantic Ocean? He says, yes. He says, take all your Morosh Chayra. Take all your self-introspective questions about where I am in life and throw them in the Atlantic Ocean. It'll do a lot better. There's a certain time and place where we have to work and focus on the issues. But then there are times when we just should say, stop it, enough already, let's get the answer. Let's get the answer. Genug with the Morosh Chayra. Rabbi Shimon Lazarov, who runs Chabad institutions in the state of Texas, he tells the story very often. He says there was once an issue that he was dealing with. He doesn't say the nature of the issue. And he had written to the Rebbe. He asked the Rebbe what to do. And he didn't get a response. There was an expert in that specific issue in the New York metropolitan area. He traveled with his wife to consult the individual. Again, he's vague, he's euphemistic, he doesn't tell us what the nature of the struggle was. And he's sitting there in the office. And as he's sitting in the office, the secretary of the man who they're consulting with comes in. And he thinks that it's him. For him, his secretary is coming to the office. She says, I'm in the middle of a meeting. She says, no, it's for the rabbi and his wife. Someone called our office for the rabbi and his wife? Yes. His sister in Crown Heights called to tell him that the Rebbe has just started the Farbrengen. And she knows that since he's in the tri-state area, he would want to know that the Farbrengen just started. He says, listen, sorry sir, I gotta go, I'm out. But during that conversation, something interesting had happened. During that conversation, that man was Jewish. And he knew that Rabbi Lazarov was a Chabad rabbi. And during the conversation, the man had turned to Rabbi Lazarov and said, didn't you ask your Rebbe? Didn't you ask the Rebbe about this? He says, yes, I did. He said, then what did the Rebbe say to do? He said, I never got an answer. So he said to Rabbi Lazarov, I guess, the Rebbe forgot to answer. There's a big pile of papers. Your paper got stuck somewhere there. And Rabbi Lazarov emphatically says, absolutely not, the Rebbe never forgets anything, and he knows it, and he didn't answer it. He says, but as I was saying those words, I wasn't really believing it. Because there was part of me that was feeling that, why did the Rebbe leave me hanging? Why didn't he answer me? He knows I need this ASAP. He said that ride from wherever it was in New York to Crown Heights, though it was a 15, 20-minute ride, it felt like 2 hours the entire time. I'm thinking to myself, does the Rebbe really, what's going on? Why didn't he answer me this? And back and forth in his truck. And he comes into the Farbrengen, he wasn't at his place that he usually was because the Farbrengen already started. He was back on the bleachers at the back of 770. And after the talk, the niggin starts, and the Rebbe starts pointing to him. And he doesn't think it's to him because it's far away, he doesn't realize it's to him. And Rabbi Groner finally has to tell him, the Rebbe wants you to fill up your glass of l'chaim. So he fills up his glass, and the Rebbe turns to him and says, his name says, Shimon, throw away your melancholiness, stop the doubts, and it'll all be good. There's a time for that. There really is a time for it. And again, I don't mean to belittle the time when they actually have to sit down and sometimes work through whatever it is. But on a day like Chai Elul is one of the days that we ought to be lifted up. We ought to be lifted up. And we should see the world through this vantage point of chassidus. Through the vantage point of Ein El Movadim, that there is only one God, that Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that there is only a God, and there is nothing else. That there's nothing else in the world other than the Eibush. And as many times as we say that, we try feeling it more, and the more we say that, the more we get it. So let's say a little l'chaim together. L'chaim. That we should feel Ein El Movadim, that Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. The Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov, that's what they dedicated their lives. That we should feel the Eibush. That we should know that there's an Eibush. The Yadai Tayin Shavei Telavach, we should know in our mind and we should feel it in our heart. Ein El Movadim, there's nothing else but the Eibush. That's all of chassidus. That's what it is. That's what it starts. That's the middle, and that's the end. And the more we work on that, the more we'll be connected to our source, and the more we'll be ufkahem above everything else.
Amen. I started off with Shabbos as well.
Oh yeah? Wow.
He's in North California,
Yeah?
in the San Francisco area. So I have my cousin there. So I kind of hook him up.
I remember a few times before going on road trips, I bumped it a little.
Someone's calling.
Thank you, everybody.
Hi.
Yoel Resnick on the keyboard and vocals. Rabbi Rachmil on the guitar. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh yeah.
We've never played together before.
Live practice session.
Yeah, we'll come around the table, we can bring a little bit together out here. Spend time together.
Sorry, it's moving on.
It's official, it's on Zoom. Okay.
YouTube.
You, oh. After the Rebbe's heart attack, so my father moved from 770 from Rabbi Levin office, which is about 6 feet by 8 feet, and he moved to Rabbi Klein's house, Rabbi Mrs. Klein's house on Eastern Parkway, and then he remained in Crown Heights for the remainder of that year. He rented a basement on Eastern Parkway, Rabbi Shikri's basement, and he was there. And evidently after a heart attack, so one needs to recuperate and go through therapy, physical therapy. And my father had the great privilege of walking for many hours with the Rebbe. First, originally just up and down the hallway in 770, back and forth, then up the stairs. And then once the Rebbe went home, so the Rebbe would walk from the house or to 770, first a block, with the car following along the side, and then 2 blocks and 3 blocks, until the Rebbe fully recovered from his condition. And so my father had the great source, the great merit to accompany the Rebbe many times along these walks. many times at the time, they figured there's this bacher, my father was unmarried, he's there, so they set him up with a chavrusa, and he would learn in 770, and of course the bacher would learn, and they would try learning sichos of the Rebbe and asking questions, hoping that my father would ask those questions to the Rebbe, and sometimes yes, sometimes no. But at one occasion, my father was walking with the Rebbe.
They ask questions on the sichos.
They would ask, hoping that my father would ask the questions to the Rebbe. Yes. And some of them are printed in the various diaries that are printed in the back of the 1977, 78 books of the Rebbe's talks. But my father had been to a number of Farbrengens with the Rebbe, and at one point, my father asked the Rebbe, I've been at the Farbrengens, and I see that the Rebbe talks for a little bit, and then they sing, and then the Rebbe talks, and then they sing, and there's a minor. So who decides? Who decides? Who decides how long the Rebbe speaks, which song they start, when they? Who decides how long the Rebbe speaks, what song they're singing, when the mimer comes, like how many talks? How does this sort of Farbrengen work? What's the official format? Who's the committee and the subcommittee and the subcommittee that organizes the Farbrengen? And with a big smile on his face, at the corner of President and New York, the Rebbe stopped and the Rebbe said, "I do." And the reason I share this story is because, in other words, it's possible to be at the Farbrengen, to be there, and to not realize that, in truth, the Rebbe is orchestrating the Farbrengen. You can actually be present, you can be there, and you cannot realize that it's the Rebbe running the show. And we obviously live in a time now where it's more difficult to be able to see that the Rebbe is running the show, but perhaps even when people were there, they didn't necessarily recognize it. And there is no doubt that now, as before, the Rebbe is running the show, and the Rebbe is bestowing and guiding and leading us as before. Rabbi Shmuel, who's a well-known shliach, he travels the world Farbrengen. He lives in England, and he tells the following story. His birthday is on Yud Gimel Tammuz, the 13th of Tammuz, which is, of course, a very big day of celebration in Lubavitch, Chabad, the day the Frierdiker Rebbe was released from incarceration. And he was preparing himself, this is 1963, he was preparing himself for his annual Yechidus, his audience with the Rebbe. He's preparing himself for this Yechidus. The night before is the Farbrengen. And he's been a bacher for a number of years already, and now he's going to muster the courage and the guts to ask the Rebbe how he can be a mukusher, how he can be connected, how he can bind himself to the Rebbe, how he can connect himself properly. And at the Farbrengen the night before, it's the Yud Beis Tammuz Farbrengen, there's a big Farbrengen, and he's thinking in his mind that he really wants to be connected. He wants to connect his heart, his mind, his soul, his body, every part of it. He wants to be dedicated to the Rebbe. And he's thinking about this. The niggin is going on. He locks eyes with the Rebbe. He says L'chaim, and he says L'chaim. The Farbrengen, the niggin ends, and the talk begins. And so to speak, out of nowhere, the Rebbe opens the Sikha with the following words. So there are those people that want to understand how they should be connected to me. And the Rebbe said as follows, he should know that his kashrus is not something that is between the chassid and the Rebbe. It is between something that is the Rebbe and the chassid. It's not the chassid's job to do that. It's the Rebbe's job to do that. The Rebbe is connected to his chassidim. All that you have to do is make a kalim to be able to allow that connection to take hold. You have to create a wherewithal. You have to create the packaging in which that energy will exist. So without going further in the story, in other words, the fact that all of us are connected to the Rebbe is not our doing. That's not something that we create. That's something that He creates. That's something that God creates. God sends Moshe Rabbeinu. He sends someone to touch each and every one of our neshamas. Our neshamas are essentially connected to the Eibishter. They're connected to the Eibishter, and they're connected to the Eibishter through this Moshe Rabbeinu. It's his job. He has all of our addresses. He has all of our phone numbers, our WhatsApp numbers. He has all of our Instagram handles. He has all of our Facebook, everything he has. But what we need to do is we need to be able to allow that to take hold. Okay, so he got his answer, right? So the next night he's about to enter a yechidus of the Rebbe. He goes in and he says, last night, the Rebbe says that we have to make a keli, that we have to do something for allow this connection to take hold. So what is the keli that the Rebbe wants you to make? The Rebbe responds and says, you should learn what I learned, and you should daven. So he asks the Rebbe, what does the Rebbe learn? And then he said, took a lot of guts. And the Rebbe says, Nigla and chassidus. That was his answer. In other words, a lot of times people say, life is very complicated. Life is not complicated at all. It's very simple. Life is very difficult. Life is not complicated. We have to learn and we have to daven, we have to learn Nigla, we have to learn chassidus. And that connection will and can and does exist. And when we do that, everything else is solved. It takes a lot of work, it's true. It takes a lot of work. The Yatzid, the Nachay, the Kayam, the Yasher. It takes work. But the Eibusher gives us some shortcuts. Every once in a while he gives us a day like Chayel. It's a very beautiful medrash. The medrash is about a man by the name of Yosef Meshisa. You've heard of the man? Yosef Meshisa was a Jew who, shall we say, was not the creme de la creme of the Jewish people. He had actually joined forces with the Romans, and as the Romans were coming into Yerushalayim, as they were coming to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, he was their tour guide. He said, here's where this shtibel is, here's where this shul is. He literally was the tour guide of the Romans, showing them the shortcuts, how they can go and destroy the Beis Hamikdash. As a reward, the Romans said, when we get to the Beis Hamikdash, you go in, you take whatever you want. This is our reward for you. So, he goes in, and he takes one of the menorahs, one of the candelabras that are in the menorah, a golden candelabra, it says. He took out a menorah. He takes it out. And the Romans say, we didn't mean that much to take. You know, you're a simple guy, you're a hedyot. Find something more appropriate for you. We'll keep that. Go back in. He says, I'm not going back in. I already insulted God once. I'm not insulting him again. They said, go back in. He says, I'm not going back in. They tortured him and they killed him. But he would not go in. What happened? The guy was the tour guide for the Romans. The guy was there helping the Romans destroy the Beis Hamikdash. He went in to loot and he takes out a golden menorah from the Beis Hamikdash. Then he doesn't want to go back in. What happened? What happened? The answer was, he spent the moment in the Beis Hamikdash. He spent the moment in the Beis Hamikdash. That changed him. That one moment that he was in the Beis Hamikdash changed his perspective. He says, you know what? I can't do this to God. I'm going to die as a Jew. And he did die as a Jew. And we know about him and we're talking about him today. There are times when we have to work with the Eibusher extends us a lollipop every once in a while, and he gives us a day like Chayel. He says, I'm giving you a day. This is a day that I'm extending to you the potency, the energy, the chayis that there is in this day. The chayis of Anilodei, the chayis of Elul. This is the day. This is the chay of Elul. This day, if we just spend the next 24 hours, we're starting, not 25, however many hours left up. If we spend this next day of Chayel and we said, you know what, tomorrow morning, I'm going to get up and I'm going to learn some chassidus before davening. Maybe normally I learn X amount of chassidus. I'm going to learn a little bit more. Maybe I don't usually learn. Maybe I'm going to learn a little bit more. And you know, when I get to shul, I'm not going to let that other guy's pettiness get in the way. And I'm not going to let this guy disturb me and that guy disturb me. And I know this guy says Kaddish too long and this guy says Kaddish too short. And this guy's a chazan, he's a pain in the neck. I'm going to not let that disturb me. And I'm going to come together and I'm going to feel together with everybody else. Just for one day, just for the chayel. And then I'm going to start davening like a mensch tomorrow. I'm going to daven. And then after davening, I'm going to learn a little bit of Gemara, I'm going to learn a little bit of halacha, I'm going to start a normal day, and then tomorrow's not even a work day, so then we go to work. Tomorrow we can learn all day, and then I'm going to do whatever I do for the rest of the day. But whatever, if we tap in, tomorrow we daven, we learn, this is one of those days that we can just enter the Beis HaMikdash, and what we take from this day can really change our whole year.
We could forget 2 words tomorrow also. There's 2 words we could forget that everyone in our shul knows. It's Mokum Kavua, my set place. Don't forget those words. Keep on going.
You'll have to explain, I don't get it.
Everyone has a set place in the shul, the set place. You can let go of a set place. Oh, someone else sat in my place. It's okay.
To come to our shul, we don't have to pay this Kabul. No one comes. It's a beautiful problem you have. I grew up in a German Jewish shul in Washington Heights. It's a community from Rabroyer, from Frankfurt am Main. And let me just tell you, just so you should have set places. The first time we walk into shul, we sit down into the place. Someone says, "I'm sorry, that's Mr. So-and-so seat. You can't sit there." Mr. So-and-so has never been in the shul. He had a membership of the shul in Germany. He's never been in the shul in America. He moved from Germany to California, but he has a seat in the shul, and you can't sit in his shul. You have a seat. You understand? So this is so we quickly bought seats. But Chayal, it's really one of those days. It's one of those days when you feel that Rebbe saying, you know what, I'm going to take care of the hiskashas. All we need to do, what do we have to do? Just learn Nigla, chassidus, and daven. What? That's all we have to do? Yeah. But this is one of those, and when we do that, all of a sudden, it's lifted up. I remember I used to go walking with, one of the ways I figured I'm going to be able to connect to this guy, he likes walking. So I said, okay, we'll go walking. We'll go Morgan. He gets up very early in the morning, 6 in the morning, we're going walking together. I gave him the Medrash says. He would read the Parsha, we would talk about the Parsha, we would go walking together, and we became very, very, very close. Now he's with a beard and a kapata, and his kids are Lubavitchers, but at the time, this was at a time, he refused, he told his wife, don't give us their phone number, they're crazy, Baruch Hashem, now he's crazy. And he tells me, it was becoming a little bit more, he says, Rabbi, I don't know what to do, I have 2 daughters, and they want a dog. And boom, that day, I was like on a high. You know those days when you're on a high? So I said, Gil, what are you getting a dog? Have another kid. Anyway, 9 months later at the boys' bris, he said, I just want to tell you, somewhere out there there's a dog that doesn't have a home. And I remember that day, because when you're in the right frame of mind, we all know that, those days, if we're part of the problem, we can't solve the problem. If we're part of the world, then we can't solve the world. Those of us who are in, whether it's chinuch, in shluchas, in areas that we're supposed to be, as the modern world word is, influencers, if we're supposed to be in a position of influence, you can't influence somebody if you're part of the problem. If you're part of the problem that you're trying to influence. So if you're coming from the perspective of hell, if I'm coming from the perspective of Elam Haz, if I'm coming from this world, then it's hard for me to actually make a dent on this world. But every once in a while we have those days where we're like on a high, and he said, you know what? Have another kid. I don't know why I said that, but Baruch Hashem, those are the days, and it comes a day like Chayel, it's one of those days. It's one of those days that Abishai gives us. He gives us as a bracha. He says, you know what? I'm giving you a chance to walk into the Beis HaMikdash. I'm giving you a chance to recognize, be there. Because the Rebbe is running the show, he's running the Farbrengen, it's true from on high, he's running everything. And the truth is that even though we can't see it today, it's happening, it's true. And his kashrus is not from us to the Rebbe, to the Rebbe to us. That happens, it's a reality. It's a function of reality. There is a Moshe Rabbeinu, there's a Nasi and a Tzusei Shel Yaakov Avinu in every generation. That's what it is, that's the reality. What do we have to do? We have to do our part. We have to lift ourselves up. And this day of Chayel was one of those days. The Abishai gave us a gift 12 days before Rosh Hashanah and Kippur to be able to do that. Rabbi Levin says it's not a scary day. Rabbi Levin, I heard a story, I don't know if it's true, but someone once came to the Rebbetzin's house and said something to the effect of, I don't know, the context of the conversation is not known, but he said, oh, that must be scary for your husband. And the Rebbetzin responded, my husband is not scared of anything other than Rosh Hashanah. And Shulchan Aruch? That's the story, yeah? Rosh Hashanah and Shulchan Aruch. Okay. Rosh Hashanah and Shulchan Aruch. So Rosh Hashanah is a very, very scary day. Not scary because there's some God who has on a big beard who's going to sit there and who's going to zap us. But it's scary because on this day, all of Seder Ishtalshalos, everything that's going on is being renewed. Everything is hanging in limbo. hanging in limbo, waiting for us to blow the shofar, waiting for us to say, Eibishter, we're going to come, and we're going to be mamlech you, we're going to crown you, and we're going to be makabel your own, that we're going to accept who you are. It's a very, very scary day. It's a very scary day. And this day of Chai Elul, the Eibishter gave us the 12 days before Rosh Hashanah. We have this day. We should all utilize it. We should take it. We should internalize it. And we should be able to talk to feel that Ein Oizim Levadi, that there's nothing but the Eibishter L'chaim L'Rah.
I want to point out there's a letter that writes about a Farbrengen. You can't feel the obligation of Farbrengen by sitting at a distance. Notice, sit as close as possible. Close as possible. It's a letter that writes his words. You can't sit that close. Rabbi Resnick, talking to us about getting higher and higher and higher. There's no chassidus, there's no Friday. And I wanted you to bring it home for us in a practical thing we should do to connect tonight to tomorrow.
That's together, whatever. He's just a little bit further for a walk.
We have Dr. Ashkenazi and Yosef Cohen and Rabbi Khan. Rabbi Bezalel, come closer. Close. Close as you can get. Close. Let's go close. Sit clear. Front row seat, same price as back row seat.
Spiritual.
Practice, yes. You know the characters in the story. It's a little bit more. It brings it more to life. But it's a beautiful. It's the anecdote is priceless. And the rabbi is not going to like this. He's looking for something else. I don't know what he's looking for, but he's looking for something. The Rebbe had, in 1991, 1992, the Rebbe had talked after a real sikh about the importance and the urgency of Mashiach and how we have to prepare the world. And there was an immediate emergency meeting convened downstairs in 77. And one of the speakers was Rabbi David Nachshon. And Rabbi David Nachshon gets up there and he's talking about what we have to do practically, and we have to create signs and create awareness and put it to the consciousness of the Jewish people. And he's talking about how we have to have this design and we have to get a designer and do all this, and he's talking. And the next speaker is Rabbi Yoel Khan. Those who know Rabbi Yoel Khan. And Rabbi Yoel Khan starts off his talk and he says like this: Praktisch gerät, practically speaking, the drei madreges and there are three levels in God's divine light before he diluted. And then he started talking, and at the end of his talk, he probably got to the same place that Rabbi David Nachshon did. He probably also talked about how, but his frame of reference when he said practically speaking, praktisch gerät, so the drei madreges and does say praktisch gerät. Again, I'm trying to be Yiddish, but practically speaking, there was some deep, lofty, esoteric idea that was in it. For him, that was practically speaking. Now, for all of us, maybe that's not as practically speaking. He lived on a different wavelength. But the rabbi said to me, practically speaking, what are we talking about? If you don't mind, I think practically speaking, it means that there are three levels in God's life before it was diluted. That's what I mean practically. Because a lot of times, chassidus is like, okay, practically, chassidus is chassidus. The Alter Rebbe wrote chassidus, and Alter Rebbe wrote the torah, and he wrote torah, and he wrote, and that was what he meant practically speaking. He really meant that practically speaking. Somehow, at least somehow, that is practically speaking. So this year, for the first time, and I think he shouldn't confess publicly, I decided I'm really going to look at the torah. We're going to do every week. I'm going to really do it. And I can't say that I understand every single line there, especially when you do it so quickly. If you have to go through those of you know, look at the torah. It's a lot of reading in a week. There's many pages of Kabbalistic, Hasidic stuff. And not every essay is, you have the time to spend and to go through properly. But somehow, when you're learning about this, it lifts you up. Somehow, that's practically speaking. Somehow my day is different. After I spent the day, and in the morning I sat there, and for half an hour, 40 minutes, we went through 3-4 pages of the Torah. Somehow, practically, that happened. I can't explain to you how. I don't understand the mechanism. But somehow, when I sit there and I learn it, that's the practically speaking. And I think that there's something to be said for that. I don't need to, God forbid, take away from any practical resolutions. Look at the Torah. Okay? But when we live in that world of Eidim Obadi, I think that you just read those words, you get lifted to it. And not always do it. The Alter Rebbe wanted us to understand everything. That's the truth. We shouldn't just go through a page and not understand it. We should sit there and read through it. We shouldn't and really understand it. But just living in that world and that being our frame of mind. You can tell a lot about a person from where their frame of reference is. You can tell a lot about someone quotes movies, someone quotes sports, someone quotes sports cars. So everybody has their frame of reference. New York, Delhi, everyone has it. You can sort of tell a lot about a person. And when someone says, practically speaking, there are three levels in shalom and Tzimtzum, that's his frame of reference. That's who I am. That's what I'm walking around. That's my sort of modus operandi. That's what I am. That's what I'm living. And it's not only true, so this is true of Nigla. I can't explain it to you, but somehow, when you study the Rambam, and you study about whether there's a perforation in the lower membrane of the brain, if that constitutes and validates the animal as being unkosher, and you're saying, why am I sitting there? And you sit there for 20 minutes and you're learning it, somehow that changes your day. Somehow you're living with this in a different world. You're living about the skull and the membrane and the tissue and whatever. We're not into the shit today. I just have to give a share in that reason. But whatever it is, somehow when we're in that world, that frame of mind, it lifts us up. It does. So this is not always meant to be a self-help book that we should say, hey, this is how we go. Just learning chassidus the way the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov wrote it, that itself does the trick. We have to sit there, we have to put in the time, it's true, and all of us can do a lot more, we can do a lot better at it, and we can all do a lot more. I was just, Rabbi Paltiel has this website called Inside Chassidus. He's doing a campaign now raising funds, so he sends these videos to raise funds. So on the way here, on the plane here, I got his video. So as I was in the airport, I put on a 2-minute video, and he says there are 1,566 Maimarim of the Rebbe. I didn't know that number. He said, we have recorded 800 and something of them. Please help us record the other 700. But it's like, wow, that's a number. We can do that, 1,560 Maimarim. There's no reason that every Lubavitcher chassid should not have that as their goal, to go through 1,566 Maimarim of the Rebbe. He says it's going to take us 10 to 12 years to finish it. But he's really nice. You've got the same video. You see, I thought he just said it to me. But I think that practically speaking, a day like Elul, it's really about living in that world, being in that zone, as they say in the modern lingo. To be in that world, to be living with that. And we start off our day that way, and we don't pull out our phones when we get up in the morning, and we say, I'm not going to pull out my phone until I learn some chassidus in the morning. I think it changes our day. The days that we do pull out our phones, I know my days are different when I do pull out my phone right away, and I don't pull out my phone. And we're all guilty of this on different levels. Whatever it is, we all feel is very important, especially if you live on the West Coast and you have everything on the East Coast. By the time you get up, even if it's 6 in the morning, you've already 3 hours of messages. It's a long time to go through all the WhatsApp and messages. You got a lot of important details to do, but if we can put that on hold for a little bit, and we can learn to this, I think that's as practically speaking as we can get on Elul. So if the rabbi has other ideas, he'll share them very much. I don't know if that's what you're looking for. You know the story they tell it about blitzes, they tell it about all different foods. It's one of those shliach stories, but it's very true that the poor man is always dreaming in his life of having blintzes, mushroom danishes, whatever berekas, blintzes. He tells his wife, I want you to make blintzes. He says, I would love to make blintzes. We don't have any cheese. He says, fine, make blintzes without cheese, but it should be good blintzes. But we don't have any eggs. Okay, fine, no eggs, but let's make good blintzes. There's not even sugar. Hey, listen, please, I'm asking a favor. Okay. He goes to shul in the morning. What does she do? She takes flour and water together, mixes it up, makes a crepe, folds it over, makes it look like a blintz. And he comes home, he's really excited. He's going to, first time in his life, he's going to have a blintz. He puts on his serviette, he puts on his napkin, takes out his fork and his knife, makes a bracha, puts it in his mouth. I was just like, I don't understand what all these rich people find in the blintzes. So it's true. If we don't put in the eggs, and we don't put in the sugar, we don't put in the cheese, and we say, I learned to this, it's not doing it for me. I need to look somewhere else. You're right. But there are, at the Rabbi Marash, I think it's in Marash, there are 3 for sure's in life. What are the 3 for sure's in life? Death, taxes. Okay, no. There are 3 for sure's in life. One of them is, if you say l'chaim, you're going to get drunk. You see some people who say l'chaim and don't get drunk. What's the thing? They haven't drunk enough. Money makes you crazy. You see some people who have money and are not crazy. They don't have enough money. Chassidus refines you and makes you more godly. You see people who learn chassidus and they're not refined and godly. They don't learn enough. But it's impossible. Min hamimna, imanu. It's impossible. It's one of those impossibilities in life. The chassidus has what it is. It has all the recipe. It has in it. It has the sugar and it has the eggs and it has all we need. It's all there. It really is. I know we live in a world today where everyone's running for answers and for life advice, and everyone has 14 coaches and 13 therapists and 75 psychiatrists and 35 psychologists because you need to have a. But Chassidus has it. It really does say to the Abisha gave it to us. It's unbelievable. It has within it the ability to be able to live a life, a life that's filled and rich and joyous and incredible. It really is. We have it in front of us. We just have to dip our head in the water and drink. And no one can get us to drink. That no one can do for us. That was a long answer.
This is the house and the love you made. This is the house and the love you made.
Pasuk says, Ein Yavel Cashapp, God's eyes are on Eretz Yisrael, Mereshis Hashana Vadach Rishana, from the beginning of the year till the end of the year. But I didn't translate it correctly. It doesn't say Mereshis Hashana, Vadach is Hashana. It doesn't say from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. It says from the beginning of the year until Mereshis Hashana Adachris Shana, until the end of year. It's missing a hey. There's some grammatical mistakes in the Bible. What's going on? Why does it start off by saying from the beginning of the year until the end of the year? So I heard someone once say beautifully, you know why? Because when everyone starts a year, what does everyone say? This is going to be the year, for the beginning of the year. By the time it's the end of the year, what happens? It's a year. The Bereshis is Hashanah. The beginning is the year. This is going to be the year. And then as we wind down, then it's okay. So everyone's waiting. The fact is, as we know, the very last mincha of this year, we're going to say Baruch Aleinu Es Hashanah Hazayis. We're going to say God. We're going to be literally minutes before the new year. We're going to say, please bless Hashanah Hazayis this year, every day this year. So it's a good thing to always get excited about the beginning of the year. We have to always have we have to make the halacha at the beginning of the year. But these 12 days are still a year. They're still a year. However, in the beginning of everything, there always has to be a little bit of fanaticism, enthusiasm at the beginning of the year, the beginning of life. I remember when we were in Masifta, our mashpia, it should be well run, Fitchi Itkin, it should have a complete and speedy recovery. He used to tell us that the mother goes into the store to buy her son a siddur. She's going to buy her darling son, who's 5 years old, the first time a siddur. So you think you get one with big letters and big words. He says to the store owner, I'd like to have a siddur that has as much commentary on the siddur as possible. So you ever see those old siddurim, the siddur of the Gra, the siddur, so they have like tons of commentary, the siddur and Dach, right? Out there, the siddur, there's all the commentary, in the middle you have some of the words. So the guy finds big, thick siddur that has all the commentary with a few words in the middle. And he says, if you don't mind my asking, how old is your son you're buying the siddur? He says, he's 4. So, can I ask, what is the commentary for? He says, I know my son, okay? My son is going to take the siddur, and what is going to happen over time with the siddur? He's going to start fidgeting with the edge of the pages, and what's going to happen is, it's going to rip the edges of the pages. I'd rather when it rips, let it rip the commentary, and at least the words will remain intact. And he used to tell us, you're in yeshiva now, you're going to go out into the world, things are going to rip. Start out with all the commentary, start out with the fanaticism, and then when cynicism, and you grow up and you get a little bit more cynical in life, it'll rip away at the fanaticism, but at least you'll actually keep the meat and the potatoes in the middle. So we're about to start a year, It's a very good thing to start with a little bit of fanaticism. I'll never forget one of my first Hanukkahs here. I was introduced to Rabbi Kunin in action. Rabbi Kunin is not known for being subtle. And it was incredible to watch. We were at that time, it was the governor. It was Schwarzenegger who was the governor. And what was nice about him being the governor is that when he lit the menorah, there was 75 cameras on anything he did. So when he lit the menorah, it was a big deal and it was a huge party, and he didn't mind a party. The next thing, what's the governor now? He's not into parties. He doesn't. The next few governors, Brown, But when Schwarzenegger did it, it was a big, big thing. And so we have this big celebration on the steps of the Capitol, and then we had a private Hanukkah lunch in the governor's office. And I'll never forget this. We're all sitting down, and Rabbi Kunin says to Mrs. Schwarzenegger, come over here, you will sit here with Mrs. Kunin, moving the women over on this side. And Rabbi, in the governor's office, he was literally separating the seating between the men and the women. And he was doing it in such a way, and it was so delightful. No one had a problem. He was doing it in his, jolly good Rabbi Kunin sort of with his mannerisms. What? But he was sort of just separating in the governor's office when he had a beautiful Hanukkah lunch. It was certainly a fanatic thing to do. It was certainly not something, but you know what? It was something that was so beautiful. For him it was important. For him it's a value. For him it's something that he thinks should be, that there should be this division. And you know what? It makes no difference. If it's going to be in the governor's office, it's going to happen. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to do it nicely. And he did it with charm, and he did it with grace. I was in yeshiva, I mentioned in Pittsburgh. There was a family there that now they become a well-known Chabad family in the community there, the Rudolph family. And at the time they were becoming more observant, they were becoming more connected to the Chabad community. And they told us the story of when they first started out. Billy Rudolph was the head of the federation. He was a well-known figure in the Jewish life. And Rabbi Rosenfeld, who was the Chabad rabbi there, had a connection with him and invited him to the first event ever. They were having a weekend retreat, and they were having a weekend retreat with Rabbi Lipsker from Florida as the guest speaker, and they invited, as VIP guests of his, the Rudolph family to come to this retreat. And they come, and Rabbi Rosenfeld introduces Mr. and Mrs. Rudolph to the guest speaker, Rabbi Lipsker, and of course, being a polite woman, Mrs. Rudolph sticks out her hand to Rabbi Lipsker. Rabbi Lipsker puts his hand behind his back, and any of us in the business know that no matter what you say, and no matter how you try to finesse it, and no matter how many seminars and kinnusim you go to on what smart line you can say, there's nothing worse than leaving a hand sort of extended and wavering in the air. Unless you have your wife to save you to sort of grab that hand, grab a hold of that hand. It's a very, very uncomfortable, and there's no way around it. This is a business card. We try everything. It's very, so she tells her husband, "We are getting out of here. Wow. Let's get out of here. These people are crazy." Anyway, long story short, 10 children later, thank God, a big Chabad family themselves. They were still influential figures in Pittsburgh, and President Bush Jr. was coming to town, and he was being introduced to the various leaders. And on the sort of waiting line, for whatever reason, the Minister of Protocol, I don't know if there is that official title in the White House, but whoever's in charge of protocol, forgot to tell the President not to extend his hand to Mrs. Rudolph. And President Bush extended his hand to Mrs. Rudolph, and Mrs. Rudolph went like this to the President with her hand back. And things had sort of come full circle. And it's sort of, there's a beauty to the story, but the truth is that it's the beginning of the year, we're sort of starting out. Sometimes there are those uncomfortable moments where we have to sort of do something which is a little bit uncomfortable. But when we start off with the Hashan, when we start off at the beginning of the year, with all the commentary around, then you know what? Even if things sort of fade a little bit throughout the year, if we start off on a super duper high, then when we get there, okay, we lost a little bit at the end of the year. But if we start off with only the words, then unfortunately what happens is we lose them as well as we move along. So, l'chaim l'racha, everybody, we should have a tzivah table, we should start off with the zest, with infusion of tremendous energy. The Eibishter makes it such that the first Yom Tov of the year is a very intense Yom Tov. So Yom Tov is very scary Yom Tov. It's 48 hours of intensity, and the more that we can capture that intensity, the more that we can be dedicated on this Yom Tov to really spend the 48 hours saying Tehillim, davening, and be there. Eibishter should bench us all, and we should have a tzivach teva, a good bench yar, kol shabbos today, we'll tell you When we moved to California, we rented a home, then we bought a home, and then we sold the home we bought to be able to buy the Chabad center that we currently have. And we used all the funds from our home and from fundraising and everything to be able to buy our Cashapp, a beautiful place. We're renovating now. And the place that got flooded, that had the fire earlier, I mentioned. And we had used all the funds, so we rented a house, whatever house we could find nearby to rent a house. Thank God we are blessed with many children. Mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov. L'chaim l'bracha. And getting someone to rent you a house with a lot of children is could be a challenge. You know the story of the guy who no one rented a house, he had a lot of kids. So he told his wife and kids, go to the cemetery. The landlord, he comes to the landlord, says, how many in your family? He says, well, it's me and my wife and 7 children are all in the cemetery. Rented in the house. Anyway, but that's not what we did. We decided not to do that. And it was very difficult. It was a hot rental market. It wasn't easy. And when you come along, thank God, with a big family. What? And we rented a house. Now, as this is going on, all Chabad stories or Shulchan stories usually boil down to two things: either a money miracle or a neighbor and zoning miracle. Right? Those are like the two. So next door to Chabad, we bought Chabad. The next door neighbors, not Jewish, but they decided to wage World War III against. You know the expression NIMBY? Everyone know NIMBY?
Not in my neighborhood.
Not in my backyard. I love kids, but not in my backyard. Now, Pleasanton, as you probably have heard, is probably one of the biggest metropolitan cities in the country, because you've all heard of Pleasanton, California. But the front page news of Pleasanton, California for 2 years was the fight between the Millers and Chabad. This is literally, they lived the house next door to Chabad, and they were trying to get us, now we can't open the preschool, we can't, all the regular things, all the things. As this is going on, we're living in this house. And this house is literally a house that's falling apart. And my wife, maybe she'd be well, really did not enjoy this house. It bothered her. The kitchen, everything was old and rickety and falling apart, and the landlord didn't fix anything, but we were sort of at his mercy. We couldn't get anything else. And at a certain point, it got to such a point that the next time she was in New York, she was being Menachem Avil, a friend whose mother just passed away. She went to the Rebbe, she went to the oil, and she wrote that she is really, really, really bothered by this house. But she's more bothered by the fact that she's bothered by this house. Why does a house bother her? I mean, it's just a house. I mean, after all, why it bothered her that the house bothers her. So she asked the Rebbe for a bracha, and she asked God, she said, listen, please, we're not looking for a house because we don't have the money to buy a house, so it's not possible for us to get a house. So please, I'm asking for a bracha that the house should stop bothering me. I should at least be content and happy, because guests would come, and she never felt that it was a nice place to have guests. It just wasn't. So I'm asking for a bracha that we should have a house. But since we're not going to have a house, so therefore at least the house should not bother me. And in order for this bracha to be able to have something that it should be able to take hold on, I'm going to add a certain halacha that I'm going to do, some learning, and be careful about chassidus, whatever it is, until Rosh Hashanah, until Erev Rosh Hashanah. This was Purim time, Pesach time. This is Pesach time. Until Rosh Hashanah, I'm going to take this resolution. Erev Rosh Hashanah. Erev Rosh Hashanah, we get a call from the neighbors. We'd like to sell our house. Would you like to buy? This is the neighbors. And yes, and because of these neighbors, some of the balabatim, some of the supporters and community members say, why are we buying a building that we're going to have neighbors next to us that are going to be driving us crazy? Now, California houses are not cheap, you probably know that. Miracle of miracles, like all the miracles happen. I came to someone, I said, maybe you could help lend us some money for a down payment. He said, fine, he lent us $300,000, and then he called me back a month later, he says, why am I lending it to you? Why don't I just give it to you? I said, I don't know. Anyway, but the point is that from that same window, that they used to complain, and they used to look down, and see the kids and call the cops and call the authorities and call the city from that same window. Right now, my kids have a chitas. Wow. They have their room right there. That same window looks down on Chabad. And they, Baruch Hashem, we are in a beautiful home, next door neighbors to Chabad, and it's never been greater. And this is not a story to say that the Rebbe is here, that the brachos are still here, which is obviously true. And all of us have stories, and all of us see stories. And I always used to say that I'm not one of those people who have stories. But the more we open our eyes, the more we see the stories. But it's more for the fact that in order for those stories, in order for those brachos to come down, we need to make a keli. The kashrus is real. It's a real thing. The Eibishter is connected to each and every one of us through the Nasi, through the Rebbe. That's the way, that's the mechanism. God set that up. There's nothing we can do and we have to do for that. That's a reality. The reality is that Moshe Rabbeinu was connected to every single Jew. And his job is to care for every Jew. But in order for that to come down, we have to make a keli. And each of us on our own level, whether it's chassidus, whether it's Rambam, whether it's learning, whether it's davening, whether it's not doing something we know we shouldn't do, or doing something we know we should do, whatever it is, each of us on our own level, wherever we are on our journey, everybody can always become greater. A lot of times people look at me in the Chabad, Rabbi, you could be more religious too. You could, I could be more religious. Because the way it works, we all know that wherever we are is normal. Anybody who does more than us is a fanatic. Anybody who does less than us is a heretic, right? So how many times have people in our community say, Rabbi, that person, they eat pork. They're heretics. Those people that are crazy, they have two sets of dishes. That's fanatic. Where I am is normal. And everybody where we are is normal. Anybody who does more than us is crazy. Anybody who does less than us is fanatic. Where we are is normal. And that's the way we always think of life. We always think of ourselves as life. as the norm. We measure everything by us normal and everyone above us and below us. But the truth is that we all have a lot more to go and we all can continue growing because every living thing grows. And as it comes Rosh Hashanah, this is the time to be able to make that real, that Eskasha should be real. On Rosh Hashanah, we're all going to write panim, we're all going to write our names into the Rebbe, and he's going to bring them before those of us who are in 770. Remember, under the shofar, I mean, it's one of those scenes. Literally, as the shofar is being blown, those bags, the bags are there. Those bags carry the names of the Jewish people. As the Rebbe is blowing the shofar, those names of the Jewish people are there. This is literally the entire Jewish people is there. The brachas are being given, the shofar is sounding, brachas are coming down, but we have to get our name in there. We have to get our name in there, and the way we get our name in there is by adding something, by doing something, by taking a halacha. It can be very small, and I'll just tell you that something that I've done for a while and started to do is take a halacha for a period of time. Because unfortunately, you take a resolution and you don't keep the resolution. But if you keep the resolution, you say, this resolution I'm doing from now until Rosh Hashanah. For the next one, I'm doing this. And I'm not going to do it after Rosh Hashanah. That's my resolution. My resolution is that I'm not going to keep this resolution after Rosh Hashanah. But that 12 days, it's real. And when you do that, then, by the way, something miraculous happens. Sometimes you actually wind up keeping it after Rosh Hashanah also. Not always. But if you take a resolution for a week, for 2 weeks, and you say, and it really works wonders. It works wonders for me. It's a practical piece of advice. To take a resolution, not for the rest of your life, because it's sometimes difficult to keep that, but for the next 12 days, I'm going to cover these 3 maimarim. For the next 10 days, I'm going to make sure to give tzedakah before that. Whatever each of us are on our journey. And when we do that, that's what opens the channels of blessing. It really does. Abisha should have from his outstretched arm, from his bountiful hand, he should bestow upon us all the things with abundance, a lot of it. And we should be able to make the keli, and we should be able to absorb it, to internalize it, and to connect with it in a real way.
Can I publicly thank Hashem? Because today I was saved from a car accident. Me, my wife, and my son, my 7-year-old son, we all survived. Thank Hashem. I don't know if I should say Gomer with Hashem, not who the Bible is. I just want to say in front of everyone from the Sefer Torah. Thank Hashem, thank you Hashem. Thank you, Raleigh, obviously, and Hashem because some of this related, right? So thank you Hashem, and let's have a great year.
Amen. Amen. Chaim l'racha. Ani ma'amina. Rabbi Shachat from here, Los Angeles, he every once in a while we were able to bring him up to Northern California to inspire the shluchim there. And he shared an insight which spoke to me. We know it says, Parshas Eikev, it says, Vayancha ve'avivecha ve'achilcha samam. That God, He starved us and He fed us the man. The man was the bread of starvation. Really? I thought it was great food. It could taste like munchies. Which, by the way, I mean, the reason to come to LA in my family is munchies. Everything else is just literally commentary. Just 2 weeks ago, we were here for a wedding. The wedding was really a complete afterthought. It was munchies. That was the reason. So imagine the man can taste like munchies every day. It can taste like, you said there's a good Mexican restaurant here, right? It tastes like Mexican next door. Whatever you want. So why does the Torah call it the bread of starvation? The Gemara gives two answers famously. The Gemara says, first of all, everybody knows, anybody who's in culinary arts know that presentation, it's all about the way the food looks. If the food looks like, if it looks like, you can taste whatever it is in the world. And the man just didn't have the aesthetically pleasing looks. It looked like, what did it look like? Coriander seeds. Okay, coriander seeds day after day. It didn't look like the, you know how many times the Viennese table looks beautiful, you taste it, it's horrible, but it's very enticing. It tastes good. So that's one of the answers the Gemara says. The other answer the Gemara says is, which means that as we know, the man only lasted for one day. You only got as much as you needed for that day. And therefore, when you went to sleep at night, your refrigerator, your freezer was completely empty. So if your fridge or refrigerator, even if you had a good meal, the fact that you know you can't go for a midnight snack, even if you don't need the midnight snack, but the fact that you know you can't go for a midnight snack, there's a certain starvation, there's a certain hunger. After all, how am I going to eat tomorrow? And there's that certain, you always feel I'm at the edge. And that's why the man felt like the bread of starvation, because you never knew, was it going to come tomorrow? Was it not going to come tomorrow? I don't know. So Rabbi Shachat said, I understand the first answer of the Gemara, I understand very well, but the second answer I don't get. He says, you know, I understand the first month or two they weren't sure if it was going to come down after a while. The first year or two, but they were in the desert for 40 years. You think that after year number 26, and after Tuesday night, the fridge is empty, but you think that they would realize, don't worry, don't feel so hungry, because tomorrow, the fridge is going to be full again, we're going to get more. I don't understand, says Rabbi Shachat. Why is it that they felt that hunger year after year, day after day, month after month for years? He says, I never understood that until I started fundraising for the yeshiva. I'm fundraising for the yeshiva, I don't know how many decades, he says. He says, every month I'm worried. How are we going to cover the mortgage? How are we going to cover the bills? He says, you would think, I've been in this business for a long time. God has come through every single month. For the last 20, 30, 40 years, God has come through. You think by now, I would say, you know what, I'm not worried. Every month I say, no, it's never been like this. This month God can't get us out of this. This month is ours. And it spoke to me very much, and anybody who maybe can relate as well. But we always think, you know, I don't know how God's going to get us out of this one. And in hindsight, it looks so simple, it's so easy, it's not a big deal. Like, why was I even concerned? The entire Nisayan, the entire obstacle, the hurdle, the test, the trial, the tribulation, it was really stupid. This is what I was concerned with. But at the time, oh my gosh, it's all consumed. Oh my gosh, at that moment, it's real. Because God has it such, you know, someone once told me beautiful. You build a building, and it lasts. You build a fire, it doesn't last. You need to constantly feed the fire. God wants it such that we have to constantly feed the fire. He doesn't want us to be able to build a building. You think, I'm this religious guy, I'm observant, I'm connected, I'm dedicated, I'm a shliach, that's it. I built my life, now I can sort of go on cruise control. It doesn't work that way. Each month there's a new struggle. Each God makes it. He wants us to have that. Therein lies the beauty. It's within building the fire, and the fire's going to go up. We got to build it again. We got to build it again, each and every day from new. That's the way Hashem wants it. That's the way Hashem does it. And this year is coming along with its own packet, and God's going to come up with His own miracles this year. How did God do it? Unbelievable. I mentioned a car accident. I was Farbrengen for the community in North Miami Beach on Yud Bais Bezalel this year. I did a Shabbat for them, and I was there with my wife. And my wife has a friend who's a shliach on the other coast of Florida. So we, Sunday morning, we drove from North Miami Beach to Venice, Florida, the other coast. Schmerlings are good friends of ours, and we were going to spend the day with them and then fly out from Tampa, fly out from the other end. And literally 5 minutes away from their home. If you see the pictures, it's actually a big miracle. My wife was 8 months pregnant, and we got into a massive car accident.
Wow.
Massive car accident. We spent time at the hospital. It was a big deal. And at the time, and then this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And as we're in the hospital, they call us, we're in the middle of construction. The entire building is flooding. There's sewage going on. And it's like piling on. And how's God getting, and it just doesn't stop. And then everything is sort of coming all at once, and you feel that there's this, just, oh my gosh, everything's coming and it's bombarding you from all the sides. The access, hayetza, that's all, everything's going on. Baruch Hashem, we just celebrated a bris of our son who was born in good health. My wife was in good health just 2 weeks ago, thank God. And all the other issues were all instantaneously averted and resolved. And actually not only resolved, but thank God, even greater and better. And that's why God has it such. But it requires a little bit of work on our end. The Eibusher wants us to work at it. The Eibusher wants us to work at it, and He wants us to work at it. And that's the way the Eibusher, Adam L'Amol Yulon. We were born to work. God didn't want us to have a free ride. Animals have a free ride. Angels have a free ride. Plants have a free ride. Everything else, we don't get a free ride. And that's because the Eibusher on the 6th day of creation said, you guys, Adam and Chava, the purpose of creation was within you. Not the other days of creation. You guys are going to be the ones to work, and it's within you, B'chayis Bar, one of the most beautiful sort of, in Chabad in general, we don't have many piyutim. We don't have, if you want to join a short service, join the Chabad service for the high holidays. Trust me, I come from a German Jewish synagogue. They start Yom Kippur at 6 or 7 in the morning, and they go all day without a break. Not because they are going, they just have to read through the whole book. They're going very quickly. They just have so much to read. They have like the Machzer, and as you know, the Ashkenazim have Machzer for Sukkot and Machzer. The amount of piyutim they have, oh my gosh, I mean, literally, it's painful. They go all day long and they're moving. But we don't have any piyutim. But one of the piyutim we do have on the high holidays, it's one of the beautiful ones, is where it compares and contrasts the angels with human beings. And if you've ever read it, and if you've seen it, the words are perhaps a little difficult in the Hebrew. Focus on it in the liturgy, in the Siddur, in the Machzer this year. And it basically says, though the angels are perfect, and though they really have everything going for them, and we are rather messed up, we're rather imperfect to say the least, we have our shortcomings, but you know what? God wants them. And it's a beautiful, it goes back and forth. We do it on Rosh Hashanah, we do it on Yom Kippur. It's really one of the stirring moments for me in the davening in the service where we're able to have that, where we really feel that. Yes, we're not perfect, we struggle, we go up and down, but that's what God loves. God loves that, to be able to go the extra mile, to lift ourselves up. That's where the beauty, that's where the harmony, that's where the music of creation is created on the 6th day of creation with Adam and Chava. So, l'chaim l'racha, this is the day, this is the day. Chai Elul, this is it. 18, Chai, life. This is it. The life of Elul. And you know, Rabbi was mentioning before how sort of chassidus turns this month on its head. So the Rabbi was saying it from sort of speak the scary to the joyous. But also, if you ask a regular Orthodox Jew, what is Elul all about? He'll tell you. It's the month that we work. You ask the chassid, you ask someone who's learned the Alter Rebbe's Torah, what's this month about? It's a month where God's shining, and you give him in the Sarachim and the 13 Merchant. In other words, chassidus takes this month and says, you know what? Yes, of course you have to do the work. It doesn't take away from that. But chassidus always takes and shows and finds the way that it's God coming down to us. It's not our doing, it's God's doing. It's a longer discussion. Right? What can come around the table? Or can we?
יש הרבה. יש הרבה שדיבה. הרבה שלי. אתה עושה את זה שמה?
I had 10 children.
כיף שהוא בא.
I've tried everything. It's still... L'chaim, everybody. Let's say l'chaim. It seems like everyone's going. Say l'chaim every night. L'chaim l'vrach, everyone. L'chaim. There was a Senator Lautenberg. I just finished with this, and everyone can go after it. Senator Lautenberg. He was the head of the Federation, the JNF, and he was in an audience with the Rebbe, and he had a very long audience, and he sort of gets to the end of the audience, and he's sort of trying to end it because he says, Rebbe, I see there's a long line out your door, people are waiting to come, so let's just sum up. And to the people there, it seemed like he was going to tell, he sort of was waiting for the Rebbe to say, hey, okay, could you please, give $1 million to this institution, $5 million? He was waiting for a shopping list. He was going to get to have a shopping list, and he was going to say, okay, we can't do $1 million, we'll do $500,000. He was sort of waiting for the ask. And the Rebbe turned to Senator Lottenberg. And the Rebbe said, in summation, if you wake up tomorrow morning in the mirror and you see the same Mr. Lottenberg, tonight I have accomplished absolutely nothing. That was the end of the audience. He was waiting for the Rebbe to talk about the $1 million. The Rebbe wanted a little change from a man. Here we are sitting tonight, it's high Elul. If tomorrow morning we wake up, you have to have a little difference. It has to be a little different tomorrow morning as a result of being in Farbrengen tonight. We have to act a little different tomorrow. Something a little bit, or a lot, or a major difference. But we have to act different tomorrow because we were here tonight. So l'chaim, we should have a better davening tomorrow,
Amen.
a better learning tomorrow,
Amen.
better tzedakah tomorrow.
Amen.
Everything we were planning on doing tomorrow, we can upgrade a little bit. We're planning on davening for 40 minutes, it can be 41 minutes. Planning on davening for 40, we're planning on giving $5 before davening, we give $6. Whatever we were planning on doing, we should do a little bit more. L'chaim.
Chaim l'chaim.
זהו?
חתם. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming, man.
I have 5.5 hours left to leave here.
Ready for miracles, Jason? I just see the miracles. Well, Yosef, I tell you, but he usually thought about the butler. Stammer those have the same name as him. She forgot the butler. Think about the butler.
Baker, Sacramento, Baker, still have two separate worlds.
Right, Pastor Sean,
We are an hour and a half from Sacramento.
In the mind.
No, south. I'm in the Bay Area. East of Oakland. Half an hour east of Oakland.
The Rebbe says, Hazen.
I flew.
It says we're 30 days of
Probably just about to say it now.
So we've already celebrated happy to Sukkot. That says in Gemara, 2 days before the but 3 days before halacha. So we already start the Sukkot.
Thank you, thank you.
וגם יש לה בקטע שכבר שאתם עושים לתקן חודש בשנה.
כן.
שספרדים
You're down there?
That night. Okay, so that night.
כל יום בשנה.
Can't go to the Meyer like that.
Hey,
On your way right to it.
Okay, done, mate.